there's a quiet kind of suffering that no one talks about. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream for attention. It shows up in the small moments. The morning you wake up with no sense of purpose. The job that drains you but pays just enough to keep you there. The relationships that feel more like performances than connections. You're not falling apart, but you're not fully alive either. Modern life has mastered the art of distraction. It sells you comfort, validation, entertainment, and routines. But in doing so, it robs you of something far more important, the chance to know who you truly are beneath all of it. Your soul, if we can still use that word, has been buried under layers of noise, expectations, and false identities. This is where philosophy comes in, not the dry academic kind, but the kind that burns through illusions like fire, the kind that demands you ask uncomfortable questions. Who are you when no one is watching? What would you do if you weren't afraid? What if everything you've been taught about what matters in life is wrong? Nietzsche called it the will to power, not over others, but over yourself. The courage to reject borrowed beliefs and become the author of your own life. Carl Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of confronting your shadow, integrating your hidden potential, and stepping into wholeness. And the ancient myths? They weren't just stories, they were maps, coded messages about the eternal battle between who we pretend to be and who we're meant to become. The truth is, most people will never do this work. It's easier to follow the crowd, to numb out, to stay safe in the known. But for those who dare to question, who feel that burning itch that something is missing, even if they can't name it, there is another path. A path that begins not with answers, but with better questions. This video is not about comfort. It's about clarity. It's about cutting through the fog of modern life and waking up to the deeper reality underneath. It's about rediscovering the parts of yourself you've forgotten or abandoned, and it's about learning from those who walked this path before you. Philosophers, psychologists, and ancient storytellers who understood what it means to be human in a world that constantly tries to make you forget. If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's script, if you felt the quiet ache of potential unlived, if you've started to suspect that real freedom isn't found in the world, but in yourself, then this is for you. Let this be the beginning of the most important journey you'll ever take, the one inward. They called him mad, dangerous, even evil. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher, he was a cultural earthquake, a man whose words were so provocative, so radically different from anything the world had heard, that they still echo uncomfortably in lecture halls, religious institutions, and governments today. God is dead. There are no facts, only interpretations. What does not kill me makes me stronger. These aren't just quotes, they are philosophical bombs, and they're not meant to comfort you, they're meant to wake you up. Nietzsche wasn't interested in making people feel good. He wanted to force people to see the world as it truly is, without illusions, without filters, without lies. This video isn't about watered-down philosophy. It's not going to give you feel-good aphorisms or surface-level self-help tricks. What you're about to explore are the very ideas that got Nietzsche cast out of the academic world, condemned by the church, and misinterpreted by history itself. Ideas that society doesn't want you to think about too deeply, because if you did, you might start questioning everything. You might stop obeying. You might stop conforming. You might start thinking for yourself. And in a world built on systems of control, whether religious, moral, political, or cultural, there's nothing more dangerous than someone who truly thinks for themselves. Nietzsche's work dismantles everything we're taught to accept without question. Morality? He said most of it was born out of weakness and resentment. Religion? A crutch for those too afraid to face the reality of life without a cosmic father figure. Truth? An illusion, useful perhaps, but ultimately subjective. He didn't offer solutions in the way people wanted. He offered challenges. He handed his readers a mirror, but it didn't flatter, it confronted, and that's what makes him so dangerous. He forces you to ask, what if the way I've been living, thinking, and believing is all based on fear? What if everything I thought was good is just a lie told to keep me tame? Friedrich Nietzsche was not an easy man to understand. His writing is poetic, often cryptic, and laced with metaphor. But beneath the complexity is a core of raw, unsettling truth. He looked around at modern life and saw decay, people worshipping comfort, equality, and conformity, while calling it progress. He believed that to truly live, to become powerful, to become you had to burn away those illusions. You had to become willing to walk alone, to suffer, to create your own values. He called it becoming who you are, a task most people will avoid their entire lives. This video will take you deep into Nietzsche's most controversial and forbidden ideas, truths that mainstream culture is too afraid to teach. We'll explore 7 of his most dangerous philosophies, breaking each one down in a way that's clear, direct, and brutally honest. Whether you've never read a word of Nietzsche or you've wrestled with his work for years, this is your chance to see the side of him that most people never dare to confront. These are not ideas for the faint of heart. But if you're ready to question everything, morality, faith, identity, even existence itself, then keep watching. Because once you see the world through Nietzsche's eyes, there's no going back. Before Nietzsche came along, morality was seen as something sacred, stable, and universal. In the West, most people believed that there was a clear line between good and evil, and that line had been handed down from religion, especially Christianity. Being good meant being humble, obedient, selfless, modest. Being bad meant being proud, ambitious, rebellious, or selfish. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant had tried to give morality a rational foundation, something eternal and unshakable. According to this traditional view, moral rules applied to everyone, regardless of time or place. They were absolute. There was no room for negotiation. If the rule said don't lie, then lying was always wrong, no matter the situation. This kind of moral thinking had deep roots in religious commandments and was enforced not just by institutions like the church, but by the culture at large. Then Nietzsche came along and threw a grenade into the entire idea of morality. He didn't just question what we considered moral, he questioned why we even had morality in the first place. He asked, who benefits from these rules? Who created them? And what if morality itself was based on weakness, fear, and resentment, not strength, truth, or goodness? Nietzsche believed that the traditional morality most people followed wasn't noble or enlightened at all. It was a coping mechanism, a clever trick invented by the weak to hold back the strong. He called this slave morality. According to Nietzsche, there are 2 basic types of morality: master morality and slave morality. Master morality comes from those who are powerful, independent, and self-assured. These people, whether they're leaders, warriors, artists, or thinkers, don't ask for permission to live as they see fit. They create their own values. For them, good means strong, creative, courageous, self-reliant. Bad means weak, cowardly, or uninspired. In contrast, slave morality is born out of powerlessness. It's the worldview of those who feel oppressed, small, or incapable of changing their circumstances. Instead of celebrating strength and ambition, slave morality flips the script. It says that being humble, obedient, and self-sacrificing is good, while being powerful, proud, or successful is evil. But Nietzsche saw this not as virtue, but as resentment disguised as morality. In his book On the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche describes how the weak, unable to compete with the strong, began to hate them in secret. But since they couldn't defeat them in reality, they did something more cunning. They changed the narrative. They moralized their weakness. They called their fear humility, their obedience goodness, their submission virtue, and they labeled the strong, those who didn't play by these rules, as cruel, sinful, or evil. Over time, this slave morality became the dominant moral system in society, reinforced by religion, education, and culture. It became so widespread that people forgot it was ever invented. They started to believe it was simply true. Nietzsche saw this as a dangerous illusion. He believed that this kind of morality didn't elevate humanity, it shackled it. It kept people small, bitter, and afraid of their own potential, instead of pushing themselves to grow stronger, to become more independent, more creative, more honest. They were taught to suppress those instincts, to feel guilty for wanting more, to be ashamed of their desires, their ambitions, their strength. In Nietzsche's view, morality had become a tool of control, not a set of universal truths, but a strategy to keep powerful individuals in check, to flatten difference, and to enforce conformity. This is why Nietzsche's critique is so explosive. He wasn't just saying that some moral rules are outdated or inconsistent. He was saying that the whole system is corrupt from the roots up. That morality, what most people consider to be sacred, is actually a weapon used to manipulate human behavior and maintain social order. And once you start to see morality this way, it changes everything. It makes you ask, am I being good because I believe in it, or because I've been trained to obey? Are my values really mine, or are they someone else's idea of what I should be? The implications of this are massive. If morality is just a social construct, something invented by human beings to serve specific agendas, then it's not eternal, it's not absolute, it can change. It has changed many times throughout history, and more importantly, it means that individuals have the right, and perhaps even the duty, to question it, to go beyond good and evil, as Nietzsche said, to create their own values. This is where Nietzsche becomes truly dangerous to institutions, because a society full of people who create their own values is a society that's very hard to control. You can't manipulate them with guilt. You can't scare them into obedience. You can't shame them into submission. They've seen behind the curtain. This is also why Nietzsche is so often misunderstood. People accuse him of promoting chaos, selfishness, or even cruelty. But that's a shallow reading. Nietzsche wasn't saying, do whatever you want, or hurt others to get ahead. He was calling for honesty, for the courage to face life without comforting lies, for strength, not just physical strength, but moral and psychological independence. He wanted people to stop pretending, to stop hiding behind moral slogans and start living with integrity on their own terms. But society doesn't like people who live on their own terms. They're unpredictable. They ask too many questions. They break rules. They don't play nice. And that's why Nietzsche's ideas remain to this day deeply uncomfortable, because they force us to look at ourselves not as moral beings defined by some higher law, but as complex creatures with instincts, drives, and desires that don't always fit into neat little boxes labeled good or bad. Nietzsche challenges us to move past those boxes altogether. In a world where we're constantly told what's right and wrong by media, religion, politics, and even social trends, Nietzsche offers a radical alternative. Think for yourself. Don't inherit your values. Don't blindly follow moral rules just because everyone else does. Examine them, question them, break them if they no longer serve your growth. That's not moral relativism in the shallow sense. It's moral responsibility. The responsibility to live authentically, to build your own compass, and to reject the lies that keep you small. That's Nietzsche's war on morality, not a call for chaos, but a call for courage. The courage to stop obeying and to start becoming. When Nietzsche wrote the words "God is dead," it wasn't a victory cry. It wasn't a celebration of atheism or a smug rejection of faith. It was a warning, a declaration of something he believed had already happened, but that most people hadn't fully realized yet. In his book, The Gay Science, he tells the story of a madman who runs into the marketplace shouting that God is dead and that we have killed him. The crowd laughs at him. They don't understand. But Nietzsche's message wasn't meant to be funny. It was tragic. He was pointing out that in the modern age, belief in God, especially in the Christian God, was slowly eroding. Science, reason, and secular thinking had replaced the need for a divine authority in many people's lives. Yet, despite this, people were still living as if nothing had changed. They clung to the same moral values, the same cultural habits, the same worldview, but without the foundation that had once justified them. So when Nietzsche said God is dead, he wasn't just talking about religion. He was talking about the collapse of a whole system of meaning. For centuries, people looked to God for answers about right and wrong, purpose and destiny, life and death. Religion provided not only hope but structure. It gave society a shared story, a sense of moral direction, a feeling that life had ultimate meaning. But if God no longer holds that central place, if he's no longer the author of truth, then what's left? That's the terrifying question Nietzsche was asking. What happens to a civilization when the story that held it together is no longer believable? This is the part many people misunderstand. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating the death of God, he was mourning it. He saw it as a kind of spiritual catastrophe. He wrote that people had wiped away the entire horizon, that we were now adrift in a world without clear direction. Without God, there is no absolute truth, no divine justice, no cosmic reward or punishment, no guarantee that life has a purpose. And Nietzsche feared that most people weren't ready to face that reality. They would either fall into despair, or worse, try to keep the old morality alive without realizing that its foundation was gone. He called this kind of thinking nihilism, the sense that nothing really matters anymore because there's no higher meaning behind anything. And Nietzsche didn't think nihilism was just a personal crisis, it was a cultural one. He believed it was going to infect everything: art, politics, education, morality. People would become disoriented, anxious, and hollow. They would chase distractions, wealth, comfort, entertainment, anything to avoid facing the truth. And in the vacuum left by religion, Nietzsche feared that people would turn to false idols, nationalism, ideology, mass movements. They would trade one blind faith for another. That's why Nietzsche wrote so urgently. He wasn't trying to destroy people's beliefs. He was trying to wake them up to the fact that those beliefs were already dying and that they needed to be replaced with something deeper, something stronger, something real. But why is this idea so suppressed? Why is it rarely discussed openly, especially in mainstream education or popular culture? Because it's threatening. Religion isn't just a personal belief system, it's a pillar of cultural stability. It provides a shared sense of identity. It tells people how to live, how to treat each other, how to find meaning in suffering. If that pillar is removed, it creates fear. Not just fear of eternal damnation, but fear of disorder, moral chaos, spiritual emptiness. Nietzsche understood that most people would rather cling to comforting illusions than confront the abyss of meaninglessness. And so institutions, religious, educational, even political, often avoid talking about Nietzsche, or they reduce him to a misunderstood madman, a nihilist, or a dangerous rebel. They paint him as someone who wanted to destroy everything, when in truth, he was trying to help rebuild something more honest. Nietzsche didn't believe that life without God had to be meaningless. In fact, he thought it could be more meaningful, but only if we had the courage to create that meaning ourselves. He wrote about the need to become who you are, to live as a creator of values rather than a follower of old ones. But this is a terrifying freedom. It means that there are no guarantees, no divine backup, no one to tell you if you're right or wrong. It puts the full weight of responsibility on your shoulders. And that's why Nietzsche is so feared, not because he took away God, but because he gave you no one to hide behind. His philosophy demands spiritual maturity. It asks you to grow up, not just emotionally or intellectually, but existentially. It demands that you look at the world without filters and still choose to live with purpose, to build meaning where none is given. This is the opposite of nihilism, but it's harder. It's a philosophy for those willing to face the void and still say yes to life. It's for those who are brave enough to create their own compass in a world where the old maps no longer work. Nietzsche's attack on religion wasn't meant to strip life of meaning. It was meant to strip away borrowed meaning, the kind handed down uncritically, the kind that keeps people obedient rather than free. He saw traditional religion as something that had become stale, rigid, lifeless, a system that once gave life structure but now only suffocated it. He wasn't against spirituality. He wasn't against awe or reverence or the search for higher truths. But he was against anything that discouraged people from thinking for themselves, from embracing their full power as creators, from becoming more than they are. In a sense, Nietzsche was calling for a new kind of spirituality, one not built on fear or obedience, but on strength, self-honesty, and personal transformation. But that's dangerous to institutions built on conformity. It's dangerous to power structures that rely on mass belief. That's why Nietzsche is rarely taught in full, why his most profound insights are ignored, misquoted, or stripped of their deeper meaning. Because if people truly understood what he was saying, they might start asking questions no one wants to answer. The death of God, in Nietzsche's eyes, was not the end of philosophy. It was the beginning. It was a doorway into a new kind of life, one where meaning isn't handed to you. You must forge it with your own hands. But that's not a path for everyone. It requires strength, clarity, and above all, courage. Nietzsche believed most people would turn away from that challenge. They would retreat into dogma, distractions, or despair. But for those who don't, those willing to confront the terrifying freedom of a world without God, Nietzsche's philosophy becomes a guide, not to destruction, but to rebirth, not to emptiness, but to authenticity. That is the real meaning behind God is dead. Not a slogan, not a joke, a mirror. And when you look into it, the question isn't just what you believe. It's whether you're ready to live without illusions, whether you're ready to become the author of your own life. One of the most misunderstood and misused concepts in all of Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of the will to power. Many people assume, often without ever reading Nietzsche, that this idea is about domination, about crushing others to get ahead, about using violence, cruelty, or force to impose your will on the world. And in part, that misconception isn't entirely their fault. Nietzsche's writing is intense, poetic, and sometimes cryptic. He didn't always define his terms clearly, and he often used metaphor and irony in ways that confused even his closest readers. But the biggest reason people misunderstand the will to power is because others have distorted it intentionally. Especially in the 20th century, this idea was twisted beyond recognition by people who wanted to use Nietzsche's name and reputation to justify horrific acts of control and violence. Let's start by understanding what Nietzsche actually meant. At its core, the will to power is not about hurting others. It's not about politics, war, or fascist conquest. It's about life itself. Nietzsche believed that everything in existence, every organism, every person, every system, is driven not just by survival, not just by reproduction, but by a deeper, more essential force, the desire to grow, to expand, to assert, to express, to become. That force is what he called the will to power. It's the inner drive behind all creativity, all ambitions, all transformation. It's what pushes a tree to grow through concrete, It's what drives a child to speak, a thinker to question, a dreamer to act. It's not necessarily violent, it's vital. It's not about destruction, it's about expression. It's not about power over others, it's about power over yourself. This idea was Nietzsche's alternative to other dominant theories of life. At the time, many philosophers and scientists were heavily influenced by Darwinism, the idea that life is just a struggle to survive. Nietzsche disagreed. He thought survival was just the beginning. Living creatures don't just want to exist, they want to flourish, to become more, to shape the world around them. That's the will to power. And in human beings, this will manifest not only in physical ways, but in psychological and creative ones. It shows up in the desire to grow beyond our limits, to overcome fear, to reject mediocrity, to create values that reflect who we truly are. It's the driving force behind every act of greatness, not because it seeks applause or status, but because it must express itself, just like a flame has to burn. Where people go wrong is when they interpret this idea as permission to dominate others. Nietzsche never said that. In fact, he warned against the kind of people who seek power only to control others. To Nietzsche, true power was internal. The highest expression of the will to power wasn't found in violence or tyranny, it was found in self-overcoming. That means confronting your own weaknesses, fears, lies, and limitations and rising above them. It means not settling for who you've been told to be. It means choosing to evolve rather than stay comfortable. Nietzsche admired individuals who were able to harness this inner force to create, to transform, to live authentically. He wasn't interested in bullies. He was interested in creators, people who could shape their own destiny. But why is this idea so feared by society? Because a person who fully embraces the will to power is difficult to control. They don't obey blindly. They don't conform for approval. They don't apologize for being different. They live with intensity, purpose, and independence. And in a world that often rewards obedience and punishes deviation, such people are seen as threats. Systems, whether political, religious, or cultural, tend to work best when people follow the rules, stay in line, and don't ask too many questions. But someone who lives from their inner strength, who questions everything, who refuses to be boxed in by external labels, that person can't be managed. And that's exactly what Nietzsche wanted to awaken in people. The courage to break free from roles, to stop pretending, to start becoming. Of course, this powerful idea didn't sit well with everyone. In the early 20th century, Nietzsche's writings were picked up and horribly distorted by the Nazi regime in Germany. They took the concept of the will to power and twisted it into a justification for militarism, racial supremacy, and totalitarian control. They even tried to portray Nietzsche as a prophet of the Aryan master race, which is not only false, but goes against everything Nietzsche actually believed. He despised nationalism, he hated anti-Semitism, and he warned constantly against blind groupthink and mob mentality, two things the Nazis completely embodied. But unfortunately, Nietzsche wasn't around to defend himself. He died long before the Nazis rose to power. His sister, who was deeply involved with nationalist ideology, edited and manipulated his unpublished notes to fit their agenda. She essentially hijacked his legacy to support a cause he would have found repulsive. That's part of why Nietzsche's name became so controversial for much of the 20th century. He was wrongly seen as a philosopher of cruelty, elitism, or even fascism. But if you actually read his work, not just cherry-picked quotes but full texts, it becomes clear that Nietzsche wasn't advocating for tyranny. He was calling for liberation. Liberation from false morals, from inherited beliefs, from herd mentalities, from internal weakness. His philosophy was never about conquest of others, it was about conquest of the self. The will to power is a dangerous idea, not because it leads people to harm others, but because it demands that they confront themselves honestly. It strips away excuses. It exposes the games we play to stay small and safe. It asks, are you living the life you were told to live, or the life you want to live? Are you repeating what others taught you, or are you creating something new? Are you following the script, or writing your own? To embrace the will to power is to commit to a life of constant becoming. It means accepting discomfort as part of growth. It means seeking challenge rather than comfort, depth rather than distraction. And most of all, it means refusing to let fear or guilt dictate who you are. This is why Nietzsche admired artists, rebels, and independent thinkers, people who dared to express their full selves, even when the world pushed back. Because that's where real power lives, not in domination, but in creation, not in conformity, but in authenticity. And that is why society will always be wary of this idea, because a person who lives by the will to power cannot be tamed. They don't just survive, they thrive. They don't follow, they lead, even if no one else comes with them. They are not dependent on systems of approval, praise, or validation. They are self-directed, self-governing, and self-created. And in a world that profits from your insecurity, your obedience, and your fear, that kind of person is revolutionary. So when Nietzsche speaks of the will to power, he's not handing you a weapon to use against the world. He's handing you a challenge to become who you are, fully and unapologetically, to rise above inherited values and small ambitions, to find your own voice, your own path, your own fire, and follow it no matter what. That kind of strength terrifies people who live by imitation, but for those who are ready to live by truth, the will to power is not dangerous, it's the beginning of freedom. When Nietzsche wrote Beyond Good and Evil, he wasn't just trying to shock people with bold claims, he was trying to tear down an illusion that had controlled human behavior for centuries. The illusion that good and evil are fixed, eternal truths. Most of us grow up thinking that right and wrong are black and white, that moral rules are universal, that what's considered good today has always been good and always will be. But Nietzsche disagreed. He believed that these ideas, what we call morality, are not objective truths handed down from the universe or a divine being. Instead, they are human inventions, shaped by culture, power, fear, and historical context. To him, what people call good or evil often says more about their personal values, social roles, or hidden resentments than about any real, universal truth. Nietzsche argued that there is no single timeless definition of good or evil. These concepts change over time from place to place and even from person to person. What one society calls evil, another might celebrate as virtuous. Take strength, for example. In ancient warrior cultures like Sparta or among Roman nobility, power, pride, and dominance were seen as noble traits. To be strong and victorious wasn't just acceptable, it was honorable. But in more modern religious cultures, those same traits are condemned as sinful or arrogant. Instead, humility, submission, and meekness are lifted up as moral ideals. Nietzsche saw this shift not as progress, but as a kind of moral reversal, a change driven by resentment, fear, and weakness rather than enlightenment. That's why Nietzsche was so obsessed with uncovering the origins of our moral beliefs. He didn't just want to know what people believed. He wanted to know why they believed it. He wanted to dig underneath the surface and ask, who created these values? Whose interests do they serve? Are they helping us grow stronger and freer, or are they keeping us tame and obedient? For Nietzsche, most of what we call morality wasn't created by noble, free-spirited individuals, but by the weak, by those who couldn't win through strength or creativity, and so turned to guilt, shame, and fear to bring others down to their level. This ties back to the slave morality idea, but here it takes on a broader meaning. Morality itself becomes a tool, not a compass toward truth, but a weapon to maintain power structures and suppress individual potential. This idea is radical because it doesn't just challenge personal beliefs. It threatens every authority that uses morality to justify itself. Governments rely on the belief that their laws reflect moral truths. Religions claim to possess divine guidance about good and evil. Schools, political parties, even social movements, many of them base their legitimacy on the idea that they are morally right. But if Nietzsche is correct, if good and evil are not absolute but subjective, then all these claims begin to fall apart. Their authority becomes fragile, their laws become preferences, their truths become opinions, and for institutions that depend on obedience and belief, that's terrifying. Think about how often morality has shifted throughout history. At one time, slavery was not only legal, it was considered morally acceptable in many cultures. Women were denied education and political rights not out of cruelty, people claimed, but because it was proper and natural. Burning heretics, waging holy wars, persecuting scientists, these were all done with moral justification. What changed? Not some universal truth suddenly appearing, but the people, the culture, the power dynamics. Morality evolved, which means it was never absolute to begin with. Nietzsche saw this clearly, and he warned that anyone who believes in fixed moral truths is either naive or being manipulated. But if morality is subjective, doesn't that lead to chaos? Doesn't it mean people can just do whatever they want with no consequences? That's the fear most people have, and that's why Nietzsche's philosophy is often seen as dangerous. But Nietzsche wasn't promoting lawlessness or selfishness. He wasn't saying, there's no such thing as good or bad, so hurt others if it benefits you. He was saying something much deeper. True morality has to come from within. It has to be created, not copied. It has to be earned, not inherited. That's much harder. It means taking full responsibility for your choices without hiding behind a rule book. It means acting with integrity, not because a priest or a politician tells you to, but because it's consistent with who you've chosen to become. This is where Nietzsche's concept links directly to his criticism of the herd mentality. Most people, he said, don't really think for themselves. They adopt the values of their culture, their family, their religion, without ever questioning them. They follow the crowd, they conform, they believe what's popular, not what's true. Nietzsche called these people the herd, not because they're evil, but because they're passive. They fear standing out, they fear responsibility, they would rather be safe than free. And Nietzsche had no patience for that. He believed the herd mentality was one of the greatest threats to human potential, because when everyone thinks the same way, when everyone obeys the same shallow moral code, there's no room for greatness, no room for new ideas, or for people to rise above the norm. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche wasn't trying to destroy morality altogether. He was trying to destroy lazy morality, the kind of morality that is blindly accepted, never examined, and used to shame or control others. He believed that the future of humanity depended on a new kind of individual, someone who had the strength to go beyond the inherited ideas of good and evil, and to create their own values. Someone who could look at the chaos of life, the complexity, the uncertainty, and still say, I will choose what matters, I will live by what I believe, not by what I'm told. That is what Nietzsche called the free spirit. Not someone without ethics, but someone whose ethics come from conscious creation, not unconscious imitation. Of course, this idea is deeply unsettling to those in power. A society built on conformity cannot function if too many people start thinking for themselves. If people begin to see that morality is fluid and contextual, then laws, traditions, and hierarchies lose their divine aura. They're exposed as human creations, changeable, fallible, often self-serving. That's why Nietzsche's work is still feared today. Not because it's morally corrupt, but because it's morally liberating. It tells you that you don't have to accept the labels given to you, that you can reject the story society tells you and write your own. But it also warns you that this freedom comes with a cost. The responsibility to live deliberately, to judge with care, and to bear the burden of creating your own meaning. So when Nietzsche speaks of going beyond good and evil, he's not pushing for anarchy, he's pushing for authenticity. He's challenging you to examine every belief you hold and ask, is this truly mine? Or did I inherit it without thinking? He's inviting you to stop being part of the herd and start being an individual. Not in a shallow, rebellious way, but in a deep, existential way. And that is far more dangerous to the world than any act of violence, because one free individual can challenge an entire system just by refusing to play by its rules. Nietzsche's destruction of the illusion of universal truths isn't meant to leave you hopeless. It's meant to wake you up, to shake you free from the dream that morality is settled, easy and permanent. It's not. It's a battle, a creative, painful, necessary battle, to live with integrity in a world that often punishes those who don't conform. But for Nietzsche, that battle is worth it, because only by going beyond good and evil can you become something greater than just a product of your environment. You can become yourself. Among Nietzsche's most profound and perhaps most misunderstood ideas is the concept of amor fati, which translates from Latin as love of fate. But this isn't some poetic phrase or passive acceptance of whatever life throws at you. It's a radical mindset, a total transformation of how we view suffering, tragedy, and the painful parts of life. Amor fati is the act of not just enduring your fate, but loving it, embracing every moment, every hardship, every failure, as if you had chosen it yourself. Nietzsche didn't want us to merely tolerate suffering. He wanted us to affirm it, to say yes to life not just when it's easy and pleasurable, but when it's brutal, unfair, and heartbreaking. This is not an easy philosophy to live by, and that's exactly why it's so powerful. In a world obsessed with comfort, optimization, and positivity, the idea of embracing pain sounds almost offensive. We're told to avoid suffering at all costs. Take the pill, buy the product, follow the morning routine, chase happiness like it's a prize you can win. Every self-help book, motivational speech, and Instagram quote seems to promise the same thing: less pain, more pleasure. So when Nietzsche comes along and says, don't just accept your suffering, love it, it feels wrong, dangerous even. But Nietzsche wasn't saying we should seek out misery for its own sake. He was saying that if pain is unavoidable, and it is, then your only real choice is how you respond to it. Will you curse your life and grow bitter? Or will you find the strength to transform your suffering into something meaningful? That's what makes Amor Fati so controversial. It challenges the modern idea that a good life is a painless one. It asks you to give up the illusion of control, the belief that if you just try hard enough, you can avoid all hardship. Amor Fati doesn't pretend that suffering is noble or romantic. It simply demands that you stop running from it. Because once you stop resisting your fate, you stop being its victim. You become its master, and this is the ultimate reversal. Instead of life pushing you around, you absorb everything it throws at you and make it part of your power. Like fire-consuming fuel, Amor Fati turns every obstacle into energy. Every disappointment becomes a teacher. Every loss becomes part of your story, not a scar, but a symbol of resilience. To live with Amor Fati means to live without resentment. That's not the same as being numb or emotionless. It means refusing to waste your life wishing things were different. Think of a failure that still haunts you. A relationship that ended painfully. A dream that collapsed. Amor Fati doesn't say, that didn't matter. It says, that mattered, and I embrace it anyway. It happened. It shaped you. You don't have to be grateful for the pain itself, but you can be grateful for the strength it gave you, the clarity it forced upon you, the fire it lit inside you. Nietzsche believed that suffering was essential to growth, and that true greatness was impossible without it. He didn't want to eliminate suffering, he wanted to redeem it. Now imagine applying Amor fati in your everyday life. You wake up late and miss an important meeting. Instead of spiraling into self-hate, you treat it as a lesson in humility and preparation. You lose a job, not just as a setback, but as a redirection, a chance to rethink what you truly want. You go through heartbreak, but instead of drowning in anger or blame, you absorb the pain and let it make you wiser, softer, deeper. Amor fati turns you into an alchemist, someone who takes pain and turns it into purpose. It doesn't erase suffering, but it changes its meaning. And meaning is everything. This way of thinking is rare. It goes against almost every message you receive from modern society. Companies don't want you to love your fate. They want you to feel like something's missing, so you keep buying. Therapists, self-help influencers, and lifestyle gurus often promise relief from suffering, not tools to live with it. Even religion sometimes turns suffering into a transaction, something to be endured now for a reward later. But Nietzsche's Amor fati is different. It doesn't offer rewards. It doesn't promise peace. It offers something more real. The ability to stand in the middle of a storm and still say yes to life. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. And this is why society doesn't promote Amor fati. It's too demanding. It puts the burden back on the individual. It says there are no excuses, no easy exits. You don't get to blame fate or parents or the system, not if you're serious about growth. Amor fati terrifies people because it removes all illusions of control and comfort. It demands radical acceptance, not passive surrender, but an active, fierce embrace of reality, however ugly it may be. That kind of acceptance isn't common. It's rare. It requires strength, not just emotional strength, but existential strength. The ability to live in a world that doesn't care about your plans and still keep going. Nietzsche once wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." This isn't just about putting a positive spin on things. It's about developing the inner muscle to face life in its raw, unfiltered form, and to not just survive, but to affirm it. This is where Nietzsche's thinking intersects with the lives of people we admire most. The artists who suffer and still create, the leaders who fail and still rise, the survivors who've seen the worst and still love life. Whether they call it Amor fati or not, they live it. So what would it look like if you adopted Amor fati? It would mean ending the war against your past. No more regrets that rot you from the inside. It would mean stopping the chase for the perfect future. No more needing life to be a certain way before you allow yourself to be at peace. It would mean looking at every twist in your story and saying, I accept this, I own this, I use this. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about being unbreakable. Not in the sense that nothing touches you, but in the sense that nothing destroys your spirit. You bend, you bleed, you keep walking. And in that, Amor fati becomes more than a mindset. It becomes a way of life, a rebellion against victimhood, a refusal to see yourself as cursed. It's not something you achieve overnight. It's something you practice, especially in the moments when it's hardest. When you're broke, alone, rejected, afraid, that's when Amor fati is most needed. It reminds you that you are not powerless, that fate isn't your enemy, that everything you face, no matter how unfair, is raw material for becoming who you're meant to be. Nietzsche knew this idea wouldn't be popular. He knew most people would prefer false comfort to painful truth. But he also believed that the greatest among us, the ones who don't just live but create, are the ones who stop asking why me and start asking what now. The ones who treat suffering not as something to be avoided, but as something to be transformed. That's Amor fati, not a passive life but a powerful one. Not the end of struggle but the beginning of strength. Not the denial of pain but the embrace of its purpose. And once you see the world this way, you start to realize maybe fate isn't the enemy, maybe it's the furnace, and maybe you, just like Nietzsche hoped, were born to walk through fire. Few of Nietzsche's ideas have been as misunderstood, misused, or misrepresented as the concept of the übermensch, often translated as the superman or overman. At first glance, the word itself can feel intimidating or elitist. It conjures up images of dominance, superiority, and a kind of cold, emotionless ideal of perfection. Worse, in the 20th century, the term was completely hijacked and twisted by fascist regimes, particularly the Nazis, who used it to support racist, nationalist ideologies that Nietzsche himself would have found revolting. But Nietzsche's original vision of the Übermensch was nothing like this. It had nothing to do with race, cruelty, or ruling over others. In fact, it was a deeply personal, spiritual, and psychological idea. It was Nietzsche's answer to the question, how do we live meaningfully in a world without God, without absolute truths, and without external guidance? To understand the Übermensch, you have to go back to Nietzsche's fundamental belief that we are living in a world where traditional values have collapsed. God is dead, as he famously said. The old systems that once told us what to do, what to believe, and how to live are no longer credible, not because we don't need meaning, but because those systems no longer match the complexity of modern life. So what happens when the old values die? Do we fall into despair, nihilism, and apathy? That was the danger Nietzsche saw, but he also saw a way out, a path forward. That path was the Übermensch. The Übermensch is not a physical being, it's not a biological upgrade or a comic book superhero. It's an ideal, a future version of humanity that creates its own values, lives with courage, and refuses to be defined by the limitations of society, religion, or herd thinking. The Übermensch is someone who doesn't follow moral rules simply because they were taught to. Instead, they go beyond inherited systems and build something new from within. They are radically authentic. They are not afraid to be alone. They don't seek approval. They are self-created. Where most people look outside themselves for meaning, the Übermensch looks inward and says, I will decide what matters. This is why the Übermensch is often misunderstood, because it doesn't offer easy answers. It requires intense self-reflection and courage. People often assume Nietzsche was saying some people are better than others by birth, that the Übermensch is about being above other people. But Nietzsche's point wasn't about social hierarchy, it was about personal evolution. He wasn't saying some are born Übermensch, he was saying you have to become one. It's a lifelong process of self-overcoming, where you confront your fears, your conditioning, your weaknesses, and move through them, not by pretending they don't exist, but by using them to grow. Now think about why this idea is so threatening to society. The Übermensch doesn't conform, they don't need validation, they don't fit neatly into categories or obey institutions, and that's exactly what most systems of power fear. Governments, corporations, religions, all of them rely on mass behavior. They need people to follow the rules, buy the products, stay in line, and not ask too many questions. But the Übermensch asks all the questions. They tear down what's fake. They refuse to play roles that aren't true to them. And because of this, they are seen as dangerous, unpredictable, even subversive. Society functions best when people agree on the same values. It thrives on collective myths. Money, status, tradition, morality, identity. But the Übermensch threatens to break those myths. Not recklessly, but honestly. They look at the world and say, these values no longer serve me, so I will make my own. That kind of spiritual independence is rare, and it's uncomfortable for those who have invested everything in stability and sameness. And so, throughout history, the Übermensch has been ignored, attacked, or twisted into something unrecognizable. This brings us to one of the darkest chapters in Nietzsche's legacy, the Nazi distortion of the Übermensch. During the rise of Hitler's regime, Nietzsche's works were selectively edited and manipulated, especially by his sister, Elisabeth Foster Nietzsche, who was a supporter of fascist ideology. She removed context, reinterpreted his metaphors, and rebranded the Übermensch as a symbol of racial superiority and German nationalism. Nothing could be further from Nietzsche's original meaning. He despised nationalism. He was openly critical of anti-Semitism. He believed the state was a dangerous form of control, and that herd thinking, whether religious or political, was poison to the individual spirit. The Nazi Übermensch was about domination of others. Nietzsche's Übermensch was about mastery of self. Unfortunately, these distortions stuck. For decades, Nietzsche's name was associated with fascism and elitism. People who had never read a page of his work dismissed him as toxic or extremist. But the truth is, Nietzsche's Übermensch is a deeply human ideal. It doesn't require genius or perfection, it requires courage. The courage to step outside your comfort zone. The courage to unlearn what you've been taught. The courage to become something new. And that's not something you're born into, it's something you build brick by brick, choice by choice. You can see glimpses of the Übermensch in many of history's most transformative figures, not because they called themselves that, but because they lived with that same inner fire. People who broke free from convention, created something new, and inspired others to rise above limitations. Living like the Übermensch doesn't mean rejecting all values. It means choosing your values consciously, living by them authentically, and being willing to pay the price of that freedom. It means facing the pain of loneliness, the burden of choice, the weight of responsibility, and walking through it anyway, because the reward is real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, but the freedom to live without lies. To become someone who doesn't need applause, who doesn't need to fit in, who doesn't need to be told who they are, because they've already decided. This is why Nietzsche described the Übermensch as the meaning of the earth. He wasn't pointing to heaven, or to an afterlife, or to some divine order. He was pointing here, this life, this body, this moment. He wanted us to stop chasing escape and start embracing transformation. The Übermensch doesn't transcend life. They affirm it, fully, fiercely, no matter how messy, complicated, or painful it gets. So when you hear people talk about Nietzsche's Übermensch as some cold, inhuman ideal, or worse, as a symbol of oppression, remember this. Nietzsche's Übermensch is the opposite of that. It's not about being above others. It's about being beyond lies, beyond fear, beyond imitation. It's about becoming so deeply yourself that the world can no longer seduce you with comfort or scare you into silence. In a time where everyone is chasing external validation, where identity is packaged and sold, and where conformity is often rewarded more than courage, the idea of the Übermensch is more relevant than ever. It calls us to rise not above others but above ourselves, to outgrow who we were yesterday, to refuse to live a second-hand life, to become, as Nietzsche might say, the author of our own existence. And that, more than any political system, religious belief, or cultural trend, is what truly scares the world. A human being who no longer needs to be told what to believe, who to be, or how to live, is a human being who cannot be controlled, and that, Nietzsche believed, is the future we must all dare to create. Of all Nietzsche's ideas, eternal recurrence might be the most haunting, the most difficult to digest, and the most spiritually intense. It's not a scientific theory or a mystical prophecy. It's a thought experiment, a challenge that strikes directly at the core of how we live our lives. Nietzsche asks you to imagine this. What if every single moment of your life, every joy, every pain, every small decision, every heartbreak, every embarrassment, every success, and every failure had to be lived over and over again for eternity, not once more, but endlessly? Not as a metaphor, but as literal reality. You wouldn't just be reborn to live again in a general sense. You would relive your exact life in perfect detail, without change, on an eternal loop. Would you welcome that thought, or would it crush you? This is eternal recurrence, the idea that time is not linear, but circular, that your life, just as it is, would be repeated forever. Nietzsche introduces this concept in The Gay Science and develops it further in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's not meant to be taken as a literal prediction about the structure of the universe, although some have tried to argue it that way, but rather as a powerful philosophical test. Nietzsche doesn't ask whether it's true. He asks, what would it mean for your life if it were true? Would you live differently? Would you still make the same choices? Would you still waste time on regrets, on bitterness, on fear? Or would you rise to the occasion and start living as if every single moment mattered infinitely? At first glance, the idea is terrifying. The thought of reliving your worst moments forever is unbearable for most people. Think about the mistakes you've made, the people you've hurt, the times you were too afraid to act. Now imagine doing it all again, and again, forever. It's a nightmare if you've lived a life filled with regret or avoidance. And that's precisely Nietzsche's point. If the idea of eternal recurrence horrifies you, then maybe you're not living the life you actually want to live. Maybe you've been coasting, numbing yourself, hiding from your potential. Nietzsche believed that the purpose of this thought experiment was to shock you into clarity, to wake you up from the trance of habit and ask, am I living a life worth repeating? But here's the twist. Eternal recurrence isn't just a source of dread, it can also be a source of incredible power. Because if you can say yes to that eternal return, not just to your best days, but to your worst, then you've achieved something profound. You've embraced life fully. You've stopped wishing things were different. You've stopped trying to escape. You've learned how to live with such honesty, such intensity, such presence, that even your suffering has value. You've accepted your life not as a series of accidents, but as something you own completely. That kind of affirmation, that deep, unconditional yes to existence, is what Nietzsche called the highest form of strength. And that's the beauty of eternal recurrence. It's not about perfection. It's not about making every moment pleasurable. It's about living every moment deliberately. It's about being so alive, so connected to your choices and your path, that you would be willing to relive it all. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Because you acted from your own truth. Because you didn't run. Because you faced it all and still said, this is mine, I claim it. Practically speaking, eternal recurrence is a tool for radical self-responsibility. It forces you to think long-term, not just in years, but in eternity. Before making a decision, you can ask yourself, if I had to do this forever, would I still choose it? That doesn't mean every moment must be perfect or joyful, but it does mean you should treat every moment as significant. Every conversation, every habit, every relationship suddenly becomes weighty, meaningful. You stop living like time is disposable. You start paying attention. You start aligning your actions with your deepest values, because anything less would be hell to repeat forever. Now think about how this mindset stands in total opposition to the way most people live. In modern society, we're constantly encouraged to escape. We binge watch, we scroll endlessly, we medicate our boredom and numb our anxiety. We live for the weekend, we wait for vacations, we dream of the future and avoid the present. Time is something we kill, not something we treasure. People say things like, I can't wait for this day to be over, or let's just get through this year. But Nietzsche's eternal recurrence obliterates that kind of thinking. Because in his world, there is no escape, no fast forward, no redo. You either live with intention, or you suffer the consequences again and again. This is also why eternal recurrence is such a controversial idea. It's too intense for most people. It demands too much. It's easier to believe in a life with second chances, in an afterlife that wipes the slate clean, or in some cosmic justice that will make things right. Eternal recurrence offers no such comfort. It says, this is it, this moment, right now, forever. And that's terrifying to anyone who's not living in alignment with their truth. It's terrifying to those who feel trapped, unfulfilled, or lost, because it confronts them with the urgency to change. Society doesn't want you to think this way. It wants you to be distracted, compliant, endlessly consuming. It doesn't want you to ask big, terrifying questions about how you spend your time, who you are, or what you truly want. Eternal recurrence is dangerous because it wakes people up. It strips away the excuses. It puts the mirror in your face and asks, can you face yourself forever? And if the answer is no, then you know what needs to change. That's the real gift of this idea, not to punish you, but to liberate you. Because once you stop taking time for granted, you start living. Nietzsche knew this idea wouldn't be for everyone. In fact, he believed most people would reject it. They would label it absurd or depressing. But he also believed that the strongest souls, the ones brave enough to confront the weight of existence, would be transformed by it. They wouldn't be crushed by the thought of living their lives over and over. They would be inspired to make those lives worth repeating. And in doing so, they would rise above mediocrity, above fear, above regret. They would become creators of meaning, architects of value, and masters of time, not because they controlled the future, but because they honored the present. So what does eternal recurrence mean for you? It means stop waiting for your life to begin. Stop postponing your dreams, your honesty, your transformation. If you wouldn't be willing to live today 1,000 times over, then maybe it's time to change how you're living. Nietzsche isn't judging you, he's daring you to live so deeply and fully that even your pain becomes sacred, daring you to say yes to everything you are, daring you to become the kind of person who wouldn't fear eternity, but would welcome it, because every moment was real. That's the ultimate test. Not how much pleasure you've had, not how much you've achieved, but whether you've lived in such a way that you could relive it all forever and still say yes again. Eternal recurrence is not just a thought, it's a mirror, and what you see in it is entirely up to you. Now that we've walked through the storm of Nietzsche's most controversial and dangerous ideas, let's take a moment to stand still and reflect on everything we've just uncovered. These aren't just abstract philosophical concepts. They're deeply personal, deeply challenging, and, if you truly engage with them, profoundly transformative. We began with Nietzsche's war on morality, where he tore apart the illusion that there is some universal, eternal good that applies to everyone equally. He exposed how most morality is born from fear, weakness, and resentment, not strength or truth, and challenged us to look deeper than surface-level definitions of right and wrong. Then we faced the existential earthquake of God is dead, not a celebration, but a mourning. Nietzsche wasn't attacking faith for fun. He was observing a world losing its religious anchor and asking, what will we do now, in a world where the old gods have stopped speaking? His answer wasn't comfort, it was responsibility. Without divine order, we are the ones who must shape meaning. In The Will to Power, we explored what drives life at its core, not just the will to survive, but the will to express, to grow, to overcome. Misused by history, misunderstood by many, this idea is not about conquest of others. It's about the ongoing conquest of self. The strength to rise again and again, not in violence, but in vision. Then came Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche's demand that we see moral values not as sacred commandments, but as human inventions, flexible, historical, and often political. This shakes the foundation of every institution that tells us how to live. And that's why it's feared, because once people start creating their own values, they can't be controlled by the old ones. With Amor fati, we turned towards suffering and met it not with resistance, but with a radical embrace. Nietzsche dared us to not just endure our fate, but to love it, to say yes to the pain, the struggle, the imperfection of life, because only by affirming our hardships can we transform them into something meaningful. We then met the übermensch, not as a tyrant or superior being, but as an ideal of what we could become if we stopped living second-hand lives. The übermensch is someone who creates their own values, lives authentically, and rises above the herd, not to dominate others, but to fully embody their truth. And finally, we looked into the mirror of eternal recurrence, the idea that you must live as if your life would repeat forever. A terrifying thought for those who drift passively through life, but a powerful challenge for those ready to take control, to live deliberately, to say yes to every moment with complete presence. Put together, these 7 ideas form a philosophy that terrifies institutions, unsettles traditions, and defies easy answers. Why? Because Nietzsche's work is a threat to anything built on blind obedience. It doesn't fit within religious doctrine. It doesn't serve political ideologies. It doesn't promote conformity. It does the opposite. It demands that you think for yourself, that you take full responsibility for your values, your choices, your fate. That's why society often dismisses Nietzsche as dangerous, extreme, or incomprehensible. Not because his ideas are wrong, but because they are uncomfortable. They ask you to abandon illusions, they strip away the safety nets, they offer no promises of salvation, only the raw power of self-transformation. But in that discomfort lies Nietzsche's true gift. If you're willing to wrestle with his ideas, to confront the fear, the doubt, the chaos, what you find on the other side is freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to become who you truly are. So I leave you with a question, not just to ponder, but to live. If you had to live your exact life over and over forever, would you? If not, what needs to change? What illusions do you still cling to? What values are truly yours? Nietzsche doesn't give you answers. He gives you the tools to find them yourself. He doesn't want followers. He wants individuals. He doesn't want you to believe. He wants you to become. So take these ideas not as gospel, but as provocations. Let them challenge you. Let them guide you deeper into yourself. Because once you understand Nietzsche, not just with your mind, but with your life, you don't just think differently, you live differently. And that's the most dangerous thing of all. Do you ever feel like life is slipping through your fingers? Like you're treading water in an ocean of endless distractions, obligations, and routines? You're working hard, you're keeping busy, but deep down, there's this nagging voice whispering, "Is this it? Is this what I'm meant to be doing?" You're not alone. Millions of us wake up every day feeling like something's missing, like we're not living the life we were meant to live. Maybe it's that job you settled for because it's safe. Maybe it's a relationship that feels more like an obligation than a connection. Or maybe it's the little things, the time wasted scrolling, the projects you never start, the dreams you keep locked away for someday. Here's the hard truth. Someday doesn't come. And if we're not careful, years slip by unnoticed. So let me ask you this. What would it take for you to stop wasting your life? That's not an easy question to answer. But what if I told you that one of the greatest minds in psychology, Carl Jung, spent his entire life trying to help people like us figure it out? Jung wasn't just a thinker, he was a healer. He believed that much of our suffering comes from one thing, a disconnection between the life we're living and the life we're meant to live. And the longer we stay disconnected, the more restless, frustrated, and unfulfilled we feel. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to stay that way. Jung left us a roadmap, a guide to understanding ourselves and reclaiming the life we were born to live. His ideas are more than just theories. They're practical tools for anyone ready to take control and stop wasting their potential. What's wasting your life really about? Jung would say it's not laziness, bad luck, or a lack of opportunities. It's about ignoring the deeper parts of yourself, your desires, your fears, your potential, and the first step to changing that is understanding why you feel this way in the first place. Today we'll unpack his most powerful teachings, the ones that have the potential to act as your personal therapy. We'll explore why so many of us feel stuck, how his concept of the shadow can help us confront what's holding us back, and how the process of individuation can guide us toward a life of purpose and meaning. Imagine this: instead of waking up feeling stuck in a loop, you start each day with clarity, knowing exactly where you're headed and why. Instead of avoiding your fears, you confront them and grow stronger. Instead of wasting time on things that don't matter, you invest in what truly fulfills you. This isn't about adding more tasks to your to-do list or pretending life is easy. It's about diving deep, facing the truth about yourself, and transforming your life from the inside out. It's about finally taking ownership of your story because no one else will. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who profoundly shaped the way we think about the human mind and our journey through life. Born in 1875, Jung began his career as a close collaborator with Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis. But he quickly realized that his views on the human psyche were different, bigger in fact, than the ideas Freud focused on. He wasn't just interested in treating mental illness, he wanted to understand what makes us truly human and how we can live fulfilling lives. Jung's work gave birth to what we now call analytical psychology, a branch of psychology that looks at the deeper layers of our minds and how they influence our actions, thoughts, and emotions. What set Jung apart was his ability to connect science, philosophy, and spirituality. He wasn't afraid to dive into questions like, what does it mean to be whole? Why do we dream? Why do certain stories and symbols feel universal to all of humanity? His goal wasn't just to cure psychological problems, but to guide people toward becoming their truest selves. One of his most famous ideas is individuation, a process he described as becoming who you were always meant to be. He believed that each of us has a unique potential, a version of ourselves that we're meant to grow into. But to get there, we have to do some serious inner work. We have to face the parts of ourselves we usually ignore, uncover hidden strengths and weaknesses, and align our conscious choices with our deeper unconscious desires. For Jung, individuation wasn't just self-help jargon, it was the ultimate goal of life, a journey to wholeness. Another groundbreaking concept he introduced is the shadow, which represents all the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see or admit. Think about the traits you dislike in other people. Maybe it's arrogance, laziness, or selfishness. Often those traits trigger us because they exist within us too, hidden in our shadow. Jung believed that unless we face and integrate our shadow, it will control us from the background. In other words, the more we deny those hidden parts of ourselves, the more they show up in harmful ways, self-sabotage, destructive habits, or conflicts with others. Jung also talked about something called the collective unconscious, a fascinating idea that suggests all humans share a kind of universal mental blueprint. This collective unconscious is filled with archetypes, universal symbols, or patterns like the hero, the mentor, the trickster, or the shadow that show up in myths, stories, dreams, and even pop culture. Why do we resonate with stories like Star Wars or The Lion King? Because these archetypes are deeply rooted in our psyche. They're not just entertainment, they're reflections of our inner world and the challenges we face as we grow and change. But why does all of this matter today? You might be thinking, how does his work help me stop wasting my life? The truth is, his ideas are more relevant now than ever. In our fast-paced, achievement-driven world, many of us feel disconnected from ourselves. We're busy chasing external success, good grades, a well-paying job, social media validation, but we often ignore our inner needs, values, and desires. Jung would argue that this disconnect is the root of so much modern unhappiness. He believed that true fulfillment doesn't come from following the crowd or meeting other people's expectations. It comes from understanding who you are, embracing your uniqueness, and living in alignment with your deeper self. For example, let's talk about the shadow. How many times have you caught yourself procrastinating, getting into pointless arguments, or feeling irrationally jealous? These behaviors often stem from parts of ourselves we haven't dealt with, our shadow. Jung's work teaches us that instead of blaming others or beating ourselves up, we need to look inward. What unmet need is driving that behavior? What fear or insecurity is hiding beneath it? By facing these questions, we can start to take control of our actions and make choices that align with our true selves. His concept of individuation is also incredibly powerful in a world that constantly tells us who to be. Social media, advertising, even well-meaning friends and family, they all shape our idea of what success looks like. But Jung's work reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all formula for a meaningful life. Your path is unique to you, and the only way to find it is to dig deep, reflect, and listen to your inner voice. This isn't always easy. Individuation requires courage, honesty, and patience. But the reward? A life that feels authentic and fulfilling, where you're no longer wasting your potential chasing things that don't matter. And then there's the collective unconscious. This idea might sound abstract, but think about it this way. Why do certain stories or symbols resonate with us so deeply? Why do myths about heroes overcoming trials feel so universal? He believed it's because these stories reflect the challenges we all face on our personal journeys. Understanding the collective unconscious can give us tools for navigating our own lives. By recognizing the archetypes at play in our struggles, whether it's the hero fighting fear or the mentor offering wisdom, we can better understand our role in our own story. Jung's ideas aren't just intellectual exercises, they're tools for transformation. They help us see the bigger picture of our lives and give us a framework for making sense of our struggles. More importantly, they remind us that the answers we're looking for aren't out there somewhere. They're inside us, waiting to be uncovered. And that's why Carl Jung matters. His work isn't just about understanding the mind, it's about reclaiming your life. Let's take a moment to explore what it really means to waste your life. On the surface, it might seem obvious. Spending too much time on distractions, staying in situations that don't make you happy, or letting opportunities slip by. But it's more complex than that. Wasting your life isn't just about what you do or don't do, it's about living passively. It's about going through the motions of life without truly engaging with it. And the worst part? Many of us don't even realize we're doing it until it's too late. Living passively often means letting life happen to you instead of actively shaping it. It's waking up every day and following the same routine because it's comfortable, even if it doesn't fulfill you. Maybe you're stuck in a job that pays the bills but leaves you drained. You tell yourself, it's not so bad, I'll figure out what I really want to do later. But days turn into months, and months turn into years. Or maybe you're in a relationship that feels stagnant, but the idea of starting over feels overwhelming. So you stay, convincing yourself that settling is easier than growing. This is what it means to waste your life, letting fear, habit, or convenience dictate your choices instead of your inner voice. Another major way people waste their lives is by ignoring their inner potential. Every one of us has talents, passions, and dreams. But instead of exploring them, we often bury them under excuses. I'm too busy, I'm not good enough, I'll try when things calm down. Procrastination is a big part of this. How many times have you wanted to start something new, a project, a skill, a dream, but found yourself scrolling through social media or watching TV instead? Procrastination isn't just about being lazy. It's often a sign that we're afraid of failing, afraid of judgment, or even afraid of succeeding. Carl Jung would argue that this avoidance isn't random. It's a symptom of a deeper disconnection from our true selves. And that brings us to another key aspect of wasting your life: being overly influenced by external expectations. Think about how much of what you do is shaped by what other people think. Maybe you pursued a certain career because it's what your parents wanted. Maybe you spend more time curating your social media image than building real relationships because you're chasing likes and validation. Society, family, and peers often impose expectations that don't align with who we really are. Jung believed this external influence is one of the main reasons people feel lost or unfulfilled. When you live according to someone else's script, you're not living your life, you're living theirs. For Jung, wasting your life often boils down to disconnection. He believed that our unconscious mind holds the key to understanding our true desires, fears, and potential. But when we ignore this inner world, when we let our conscious mind override it with distractions, excuses, and external pressures, we become fragmented. It's like trying to drive a car while ignoring the engine. On the surface, you might look fine, but deep down, you're not running smoothly. This disconnection creates a sense of restlessness, boredom, or even despair. One way this disconnection manifests is through unfulfilling jobs or relationships. How many people stay in careers they hate because they're afraid of change? How many people stay in toxic relationships because they fear loneliness? These situations might feel safe, but they come at a cost. Jung would say that staying in these situations is like rejecting a part of yourself. Your unconscious mind knows what you truly want and need, and when you ignore it, you feel stuck and unsatisfied. Procrastination is another form of disconnection. It's easy to write off procrastination as laziness, but Jung saw it as a deeper problem. When you put off important tasks or avoid pursuing your dreams, it's often because there's a conflict between your conscious mind and your unconscious desires. Maybe you're afraid of failure, so you distract yourself to avoid facing that fear. Or maybe the task you're avoiding doesn't align with your true values, so your unconscious mind resists it. Understanding these hidden motivations can help you break free from the cycle of procrastination and start living with purpose. Another trap is spending too much time seeking external validation. Whether it's through social media, material possessions, or accomplishments, many of us chase things that make us look good to others, but these things rarely bring true satisfaction. Jung would argue that this pursuit of external validation is a way of avoiding the hard work of looking inward. Instead of asking, "What do I really want?" we ask, "What will make me look successful?" This disconnect from our inner desires is a recipe for wasting our lives. So what's the solution? Jung believed that the first step is recognizing the disconnection. Pay attention to the parts of your life that feel unfulfilling or empty. Are you staying in a situation because it's comfortable or because it truly aligns with your values? Are you procrastinating because you're lazy or because you're afraid? Are you chasing external success or are you pursuing what genuinely matters to you? These questions can help you uncover the ways you've been living passively and ignoring your inner self. Living with purpose requires courage. It means confronting the parts of yourself that you'd rather avoid, your fears, your insecurities, your regrets. It means taking risks and stepping outside your comfort zone. But Jung would argue that this is the only way to stop wasting your life. When you align your actions with your inner desires, you start to feel a sense of wholeness and fulfillment. You're no longer just going through the motions, you're actively creating a life that feels meaningful. The good news is that it's never too late to change. Whether you're a teenager figuring out your path or an adult who feels like you've wasted years, Jung's work offers a roadmap for reconnecting with yourself. By exploring your unconscious mind, facing your fears, and letting go of external expectations, you can start living a life that feels authentic and purposeful. It's not easy, but as Jung himself said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So take a moment to reflect. Where in your life are you living passively? What dreams or desires have you been ignoring? What would it look like to reconnect with your true self? These questions might be uncomfortable, but they're also the first step toward reclaiming your life. And the sooner you start asking them, the sooner you can stop wasting your potential and start living the life you are meant to live. Carl Jung's ideas aren't just theoretical, they're practical tools for reclaiming your life and living it fully. At the core of his work is the belief that we all have the potential to become our truest, most fulfilled selves. But to get there, we need to understand who we are at a deep level and align our actions with our inner values and desires. Jung laid out several key concepts that can help us on this journey, and applying them can transform the way we live. One of his most powerful ideas is individuation, which he described as the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be. Think of individuation as a journey toward wholeness. It's about discovering your unique strengths, values, and purpose, and using them to guide your life. According to Jung, many people waste their lives because they never embark on this journey. Instead, they live in ways that please others or follow societal expectations, ignoring the unique potential that lies within them. Individuation isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity. It means asking yourself, what really matters to me? What kind of person do I want to be? This process requires you to strip away the layers of influence from parents, friends, culture, and even your own fears so you can uncover what's truly yours. When you align your life with your core values and strengths, you stop feeling like you're drifting or wasting time. Instead, you gain clarity and purpose. To start the individuation process, take time to reflect on your life. What are your strengths? What activities make you feel alive? What are the values that guide your decisions? Write these down and think about how they align with the life you're currently living. If there's a gap between who you are and how you're living, that's where your work begins. The shadow, facing the parts of yourself you suppress. Jung's concept of the shadow is another powerful tool for transformation. The shadow is made up of all the parts of yourself that you deny, suppress, or ignore. Your fears, insecurities, selfishness, anger, and even unrecognized strengths. We all have a shadow, and if we don't confront it, it can control us in ways we don't even realize. It might show up as self-sabotage, toxic relationships, procrastination, or irrational fears. Why is facing the shadow so important? Because the parts of yourself you suppress don't just disappear, they lurk in the background, influencing your thoughts and actions in subtle but powerful ways. For example, if you suppress your anger, it might come out as passive-aggressive behavior or unexplained frustration. If you deny your ambition, you might find yourself resenting others who succeed. He believed that integrating the shadow, accepting and understanding these hidden parts of yourself is essential for living a full and authentic life. How do you confront your shadow? Start by paying attention to what triggers you. Do certain people or situations make you angry, jealous, or anxious? These reactions can be clues to parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. Journaling can also help. Write down your thoughts and feelings honestly, without judgment. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to admit about myself? What part of me do I not want others to see? Facing these questions might feel uncomfortable, but it's the first step to breaking free from the patterns that hold you back. Meaning and myth, finding your purpose through symbols. Jung believed that humans are deeply connected to symbols and stories. Myths, dreams, and art aren't just random. They reflect universal truths about the human experience. He called these universal patterns archetypes, and he believed they live in our collective unconscious. Archetypes like the hero, the mentor, or the shadow represent the challenges and transformations we all face in life. By tapping into these symbols and stories, we can find meaning and purpose in our own lives. Think about the stories or symbols that resonate with you. Maybe you've always been drawn to tales of overcoming great odds or embarking on a journey of self-discovery. These aren't just entertaining, they're reflections of the inner journey you need to take. Recognizing these patterns can help you understand your own struggles and guide you toward the life you want to live. For example, if you feel stuck or lost, you might identify with the archetype of the hero. The hero's journey is about stepping out of your comfort zone, facing challenges, and growing stronger in the process. Thinking of your life in these terms can give you a sense of purpose and direction. You're not just aimlessly drifting, you're on a journey, and every challenge you face is an opportunity for growth. Jung's concepts might seem abstract at first, but there are practical ways to apply them to your life. Here are some steps you can take today. 1. Journaling and dream analysis. One of the simplest yet most effective ways to connect with your unconscious mind is to start a journal. Write down your thoughts, feelings, and recurring dreams. Dreams, according to Jung, are messages from your unconscious. They often use symbols to reveal what's going on beneath the surface. Pay attention to recurring symbols or themes in your dreams and ask yourself what they might represent. For example, if you often dream of being lost, it might reflect feelings of uncertainty or a lack of direction in your waking life. 2. Explore what excites or frustrates you. Your emotions are powerful guides. What activities or ideas make you feel alive and energized? What situations frustrate or anger you? These reactions are clues to your shadow and your true desires. For example, if you feel jealous of someone who's pursuing their passion, it might be a sign that you're ignoring your own creative potential. Use these feelings as starting points for self-reflection. 3. Practice self-honesty. Living authentically requires brutal honesty with yourself. Take a hard look at your life and ask, am I living according to my values, or am I just going through the motions? Be willing to admit where you've been settling, avoiding, or procrastinating. This isn't about beating yourself up, it's about creating a clear picture of where you are so you can decide where you want to go. 4. Integrate your shadow. Once you've identified parts of your shadow, work on accepting them. This doesn't mean indulging in harmful behaviors. It means understanding and integrating those parts of yourself in healthy ways. For example, if you've suppressed your anger, find constructive ways to express it, like setting boundaries or standing up for yourself. If you've denied your need for rest, give yourself permission to take a break without guilt. 5. Connect with symbols and stories. Look for inspiration in myths, art, and stories that resonate with you. Reflect on how these symbols apply to your own life. For example, if you admire the resilience of a fictional character, ask yourself how you can embody that quality in your own challenges. Jung's teachings aren't quick fixes. They're tools for lifelong growth. They require patience, reflection, and courage, but the reward is worth it. By embracing these ideas, you can stop wasting your life on things that don't matter and start living with purpose, authenticity, and meaning. You'll move from a state of disconnection to one of alignment, where your actions reflect your true self and your life feels like your own. This journey isn't easy, but as he reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The work might be challenging, but it's also liberating. The more you understand yourself, the more you can take control of your life and create a path that feels meaningful and fulfilling. It's not always easy to realize when you're wasting your life. We get caught up in routines, responsibilities, and distractions, often pushing aside the uneasy feelings that tell us something is wrong. But those feelings, boredom, dissatisfaction, or a nagging sense of being stuck, are like warning lights on the dashboard of your car. They're signals from your unconscious mind telling you it's time to pay attention and make a change. Carl Jung believed these signals are not random. They're your psyche's way of urging you to wake up and take control of your life. One of the most obvious signs that you might be wasting your life is chronic boredom or dissatisfaction. This isn't the kind of boredom you feel when you're waiting in line or sitting through a dull lecture. It's a deeper, persistent feeling that your life is missing something important. Maybe you go to work every day, but it feels like a grind. You're not excited by what you do, and you can't see how it connects to anything meaningful. Even your free time might feel empty, filled with mindless scrolling, binge watching, or other distractions that don't bring real joy. If you constantly feel like you're just killing time, it's a clear sign that something needs to change. Another warning sign is feeling unmotivated or stuck. Do you wake up in the morning without any sense of purpose? Do you find yourself procrastinating, even on things that are important? Feeling stuck can happen for a lot of reasons. Maybe you're afraid of failure, so you avoid taking risks. Maybe you're overwhelmed by the choices in front of you, so you don't make any decisions at all. Or maybe you've been living on autopilot for so long that you've forgotten what you're even passionate about. Jung would say this feeling of being stuck is often a sign that you're out of alignment with your deeper self. Your unconscious mind knows you're capable of more, but your conscious mind is resisting the change. Living according to other people's expectations is another way we waste our lives, even if we don't realize it. From a young age, we're taught to seek approval, from parents, teachers, friends, and society as a whole. Maybe you chose a career because it was practical, not because you loved it. Maybe you're in a relationship because it looks good from the outside, even though it doesn't truly make you happy. When you make decisions based on what others want or expect, you're not living your life, you're living theirs. Over time, this can lead to a deep sense of dissatisfaction because you're ignoring your own desires and values. Jung believed that these feelings, boredom, dissatisfaction, lack of motivation, and the pressure to conform are all signals from the unconscious mind. They're not random annoyances, they're messages. Your unconscious is trying to get your attention, urging you to stop and reflect. When you ignore these signals, they often grow louder, manifesting as anxiety, depression, or even physical symptoms like fatigue. But if you take the time to listen, these signals can guide you toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. So, how do you know if these warning signs apply to you? Start by asking yourself some tough questions. Are you truly happy with how you're spending your days? Do you feel like you're making progress towards something meaningful, or are you just going through the motions? When was the last time you felt genuinely excited about something? These questions might feel uncomfortable, but they're an essential part of self-reflection. Let's talk more about boredom. Many people dismiss boredom as a minor annoyance, but Jung saw it as a powerful clue. If you're bored, it's often because your life lacks meaning or purpose. Maybe you've fallen into a routine that's too predictable, or maybe you're avoiding challenges that could help you grow. Boredom is your unconscious mind's way of saying, there's more to life than this. Instead of brushing it off, try to understand what it's telling you. What parts of your life feel empty or unfulfilling? What would it take to bring more excitement or curiosity into your day? The feeling of being stuck is another warning sign worth exploring. When you're stuck, it's like your life is on pause. You might know what you want to do, but you can't seem to take the first step, or maybe you don't know what you want at all, so you avoid making decisions. This paralysis often comes from fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice, or fear of leaving your comfort zone. Jung believed that these fears are tied to the shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress or deny. Facing your shadow can help you understand what's holding you back and give you the courage to move forward. Living for others is perhaps the most insidious way to waste your life because it often feels like you're doing the right thing. After all, isn't it good to make your parents proud, to meet society's expectations, or to fit in with your peers? But when you live for others, you sacrifice your own happiness and authenticity. Jung would say that this is a form of disconnection from your true self. Over time, it can lead to resentment, burnout, or a sense of emptiness. The solution isn't to ignore others' opinions entirely, but to balance them with your own needs and desires. If any of these warning signs resonate with you, don't panic. Recognizing them is the first step toward change. Take some time to reflect on where you are and where you want to go. You might start by journaling about the areas of your life that feel unfulfilling. Ask yourself why you feel bored, stuck, or disconnected. What's missing? What are you avoiding? These questions can help you uncover the root causes of your dissatisfaction. Jung's work teaches us that these warning signs aren't something to fear or avoid. They're opportunities. They're your mind's way of telling you that it's time to grow, to change, and to live more authentically. The process isn't easy. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it's also deeply rewarding. By listening to these signals and taking action, you can stop wasting your life and start living in a way that feels meaningful and true to who you are. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you happy with your life? If not, what needs to change? These questions might not have easy answers, but they're the ones that matter most. And the sooner you start asking them, the sooner you can begin the journey toward a life that feels truly yours. Taking control of your life isn't about flipping a switch and expecting everything to change overnight. It's about making consistent, conscious decisions to align your actions with who you truly are and what you truly want. Jung's teachings provide a powerful framework for this process. By facing your shadow, seeking meaning, and embracing growth, you can gradually reclaim your path and live a life that feels authentic and fulfilling. Let's break this down into actionable steps that you can start today. 1. Face the shadow. Reflect on uncomfortable truths about yourself. One of the most important yet challenging steps in taking control of your life is confronting your shadow. The shadow, as Jung described it, consists of the parts of yourself that you don't want to acknowledge, your fears, insecurities, and flaws, but also hidden strengths and untapped potential. These parts of you don't go away just because you ignore them. In fact, the more you suppress them, the more control they can exert over your life in unconscious ways. Facing your shadow starts with self-honesty. This means taking a deep, unfiltered look at yourself. What are the habits or patterns in your life that you're not proud of? Are you quick to anger, or do you avoid confrontation at all costs? Do you struggle with procrastination, or do you find yourself constantly seeking approval from others? These behaviors often stem from parts of your shadow. For example, if you procrastinate, it might be because you're afraid of failure. If you avoid confrontation, it might be because you fear rejection. To begin this process, set aside time for reflection. Journaling can be a powerful tool. Write about the situations or people that trigger strong emotions in you. Ask yourself why those situations bother you so much. Often the traits we dislike in others are mirrors of the traits we deny in ourselves. For example, if arrogance irritates you, it could be because you've suppressed your own confidence. By acknowledging these hidden parts of yourself, you can start to integrate them in healthy ways. Facing your shadow isn't about beating yourself up or trying to fix yourself. It's about understanding that every part of you, even the ones you don't like, has something valuable to teach you. When you confront these truths head-on, you take away their power to control you. You become more self-aware, more balanced, and more capable of making intentional choices. 2. Seek meaning. Explore your interests and passions. Once you've begun to face your shadow, the next step is to seek meaning in your life. Jung believed that a life without meaning is one of the greatest sources of unhappiness. Meaning isn't something you find outside of yourself, it's something you create by exploring what genuinely excites and fulfills you. What are the things that make you feel alive? What would you spend your time doing if there were no limits or expectations? Start by asking yourself some simple but powerful questions. What do I truly care about? What am I curious about? What activities make me lose track of time? These questions can help you uncover your passions and interests. Don't worry if the answers don't seem grand or impressive. Meaning doesn't have to come from a life-changing career or a world-famous talent. It can come from small, everyday things, helping others, creating art, learning something new, or simply spending time with people you care about. If you're unsure where to start, try experimenting. Take a class, read a book on a topic you've always been curious about, or try a new hobby. Pay attention to how these activities make you feel. Do they energize you? Do they spark your curiosity? If something doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. The process of seeking meaning is about trial and error. What matters is that you're actively engaging with your life and discovering what brings you joy and purpose. Jung also emphasized the importance of symbolic thinking in finding meaning. Symbols, myths, and archetypes can help you connect with deeper layers of your psyche. For example, think about the stories or characters you've always admired. Maybe you're drawn to the hero archetype, which represents courage and growth, or perhaps the creator archetype, which embodies innovation and imagination. These archetypes can provide clues about the qualities and values that are most important to you. 3. Embrace growth. See challenges as opportunities for transformation. Growth isn't always easy. It often involves stepping outside of your comfort zone, facing setbacks, and pushing through discomfort. But Jung believed that challenges and struggles are essential for personal transformation. In fact, he argued that growth often comes from confronting difficulties rather than avoiding them. To embrace growth, start by shifting your mindset about challenges. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, try to view them as opportunities to learn and evolve. For example, if you've recently faced a failure, ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use it to become stronger or wiser? Growth doesn't mean avoiding pain or difficulty. It means finding meaning in those experiences and using them as stepping stones toward a better version of yourself. A great way to embrace growth is to set small, achievable goals that challenge you. These goals should push you just outside your comfort zone but still feel manageable. For instance, if you struggle with social anxiety, your goal might be to start a conversation with a new person once a week. If you've been avoiding a creative project because you're afraid of failure, your goal might be to spend 30 minutes a day working on it, regardless of the outcome. Each time you achieve a goal, no matter how small, you'll build confidence and momentum. Remember that growth isn't a straight path. There will be setbacks and moments of doubt. But these moments are part of the process. Jung compared personal growth to the process of alchemy, turning lead into gold. Just like in alchemy, transformation takes time, effort, and patience. Each challenge you face is an opportunity to refine and strengthen yourself, bringing you closer to your true potential. If there's one thing Jung's teachings make clear, it's that personal transformation isn't a quick fix. The journey to reclaim your life and become your true self is a lifelong process. It requires patience, persistence, and self-compassion. You won't have all the answers right away, and that's okay. What matters is that you're willing to take the first step and keep moving forward. One of the biggest mistakes people make is expecting immediate results. They want to wake up one day and feel completely fulfilled and in control. But real growth doesn't work that way. It happens gradually, through small changes and consistent effort. Think of it like planting a seed. You can't force it to grow overnight. You have to nurture it, give it time, and trust the process. As you embark on this journey, be kind to yourself. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress and days when you feel stuck or discouraged. That's normal. Personal growth is a messy, non-linear process. The important thing is to keep showing up for yourself, even when it feels hard. Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming your true self, is the greatest adventure of a lifetime. It's not about reaching a final destination, it's about embracing the journey. Every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to a life that feels authentic and meaningful, and that in the end is what it means to truly take control of your life. Life is fleeting. The days pass quickly, and before you know it, weeks, months, and years can slip by. It's easy to tell yourself that there's plenty of time to make changes, that you'll get to it tomorrow or someday. But here's the harsh truth. Time doesn't wait. The longer you ignore your inner voice, the harder it becomes to reclaim your path. That sense of dissatisfaction or restlessness you feel is your unconscious mind urging you to act, to stop drifting, and to start living a life that truly matters. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Think about that for a moment. Becoming your true self isn't just a goal, it's the most important journey you can undertake. It's not something you can delegate to someone else, and it's not something you can put off forever without consequences. Every day you delay, you're drifting further from the person you're meant to be. The time to act is now, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Procrastination might feel harmless, but it's a thief. Every moment you spend waiting to start is a moment you'll never get back. Think about the stories you tell yourself. I'll start when I have more time, or I'll focus on myself after I've handled this or that. The truth is, there's never going to be a perfect time. Life will always be busy, and there will always be distractions. If you keep waiting for the stars to align, you'll wake up one day wondering where your life went. Jung's work emphasizes that these feelings of boredom, dissatisfaction, and disconnection aren't just random. They're signals from your unconscious mind. They're your psyche's way of telling you that something needs to change. If you ignore them, those feelings don't just go away. They grow stronger, often manifesting as anxiety, depression, or a persistent sense of unease. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to break free from these patterns and reclaim your life. So, where do you start? The idea of transforming your life can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. You don't need to make drastic changes overnight. The key is to start small, with consistent, intentional actions that bring you closer to your true self. Remember, Jung's process of individuation, the journey to becoming who you truly are, isn't about quick fixes. It's a lifelong journey, and every step forward counts. Begin by setting aside time to reflect. Take out a journal and write about your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. What parts of your life feel unfulfilling? What dreams or passions have you been ignoring? What fears or insecurities are holding you back? Be honest with yourself. This is your chance to face the truths you've been avoiding and start exploring the depths of who you are. You might also consider exploring Jung's writings. Books like Man and His Symbols or The Undiscovered Self can provide valuable insights into the workings of your unconscious mind. Don't feel pressured to understand everything right away. Jung's ideas are deep and complex, and it's okay to take your time. The goal isn't to master his teachings overnight, but to use them as tools for self-discovery and growth. Once you take the first step, you'll start to build momentum. Each small action you take, whether it's journaling, reflecting on a dream, or setting a new goal, brings you closer to the life you want. Over time, these small actions add up, creating a ripple effect that can transform your entire life. The key is to stay consistent even when it feels challenging. Change doesn't happen in a straight line. There will be setbacks and moments of doubt, but each step forward is progress. Think of this journey as planting a garden. At first, it might feel like nothing is happening. You're digging in the dirt, planting seeds, and waiting for them to grow. But with time, care, and patience, those seeds begin to sprout. The same is true for your personal growth. The work you put in today might not yield immediate results, but over time, you'll see the fruits of your effort. As you take these steps, imagine the life you could create. Picture a version of yourself who wakes up each day with clarity and purpose. Imagine feeling confident in your decisions, knowing they're aligned with your values and goals. Think about the sense of fulfillment that comes from pursuing your passions, building meaningful relationships, and living authentically. This isn't just a fantasy, it's a real possibility, but it requires action. The person you want to become is waiting for you, but you have to take the first step to meet them. The longer you wait, the further away that person drifts. But every small action you take brings you closer, bridging the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Taking control of your life isn't just about feeling happier or more fulfilled, it's about honoring your potential. You have unique strengths, talents, and gifts that no one else possesses. By ignoring them, you're not just wasting your life, you're depriving the world of what only you can offer. Jung believed that each person has a role to play in the greater tapestry of humanity. By becoming your true self, you contribute to something larger than yourself. This journey also matters because it's your life. No one else can live it for you. At the end of the day, you're the one who has to answer the question, did I live fully? Did I honor my potential? These questions might feel far away, but they're closer than you think. The choices you make today determine the life you'll look back on tomorrow. Remember, this video is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you take what you've learned and apply it to your life. Becoming your true self is the privilege of a lifetime, but it's also a responsibility. No one else can do it for you, and no one else will benefit from it as much as you will. The journey isn't easy, but it's worth every step. Each action you take, no matter how small, is a declaration that your life matters, that your potential matters, and that you're ready to honor both. The time to start is now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't exist. Begin where you are, with what you have, and trust that each step forward will bring you closer to the life you're meant to live. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, so take that privilege and make it count. Imagine yourself soaring high above the clouds, wings crafted from feathers and wax strapped securely to your back. You're Icarus, and beneath you lies the sprawling blue ocean, the air crisp and exhilarating. You rise higher, feeling unstoppable, invincible. But slowly, the warmth of the sun intensifies into heat, melting the wax that holds your fragile wings together. Suddenly, your ascent turns into a desperate plunge. In moments, triumph transforms into tragedy, ambition into hubris, and freedom into ruin. This powerful scene isn't merely a cautionary tale from ancient times. It's a profound reflection of human nature, ambition, and the delicate balance between reaching for our dreams and understanding our limitations. Yet, despite its age, the story of Icarus continues to resonate deeply. Why? Because Greek mythology, filled with gods, monsters, heroes, and ordinary mortals thrust into extraordinary situations, captures something timeless about the human condition. Greek myths endure because they confront the fundamental aspects of being human: love, loss, ambition, courage, fear, and hope. These stories aren't simply entertaining fables, they are mirrors reflecting our deepest struggles and aspirations. Thousands of years later, we still turn to these myths because, despite modern advancements, the essence of humanity remains unchanged. People today grapple with the same existential dilemmas faced by ancient heroes and mortals. When we revisit these myths, we don't just revisit history, we revisit ourselves, discovering profound insights into our own lives. Whether it's the relentless toil of Sisyphus endlessly pushing his boulder uphill, or Pandora opening a box filled with unforeseen consequences, each myth embodies a crucial philosophical lesson about how we live, think, and interact with the world around us. Throughout this video, we'll journey through 10 remarkable Greek myths, each selected for the depth and power of the philosophical truths they illustrate. As we explore each story, we will unravel the wisdom hidden within these ancient narratives, translating them into practical lessons relevant to our contemporary lives. By understanding the tale of Narcissus, we'll learn about the subtle yet destructive nature of vanity and ego, recognizing how unchecked self-obsession can poison relationships and isolate us. Through Hercules and his seemingly impossible labors, we'll grasp the critical importance of resilience, perseverance, and confronting life's challenges head-on, no matter how daunting they appear. From Prometheus's courageous rebellion against divine authority, we'll reflect on the virtues of bravery, sacrifice, and the human capacity for profound innovation, even at great personal risk. Our aim isn't simply to recount these myths, but to illuminate their hidden depths, connecting ancient wisdom directly to your experiences today. Each story will help you better understand yourself, your choices, and the world around you. You'll gain a richer perspective on familiar struggles, finding meaning, handling ambition responsibly, overcoming grief, managing curiosity, and much more. By the end of this exploration, you'll see that Greek myths aren't relics of a distant past, but rather living guides that offer clarity, inspiration, and profound philosophical insight. As we move forward, keep this thought in mind. These myths are powerful precisely because they tell us something essential and enduring about ourselves. Let's dive deep into these ancient stories, uncover their wisdom, and discover together how these timeless lessons can transform our lives. Imagine waking up every single morning with the exact same daunting task waiting for you, knowing fully that no matter how hard you try, you'll never accomplish it completely. You pour your strength and energy into it day after day, your muscles aching, your mind exhausted, and yet every night, the task resets itself, uncompleted, waiting again for your effort the following day. This repetitive cycle, as frustrating as it sounds, was the eternal punishment handed down to Sisyphus, a figure from ancient Greek mythology. According to myth, Sisyphus was a clever but deceitful king who repeatedly angered the gods through his cunning tricks and manipulations. As punishment for his defiance, Zeus condemned him to roll a huge boulder up a steep hill for eternity. Every time Sisyphus reached the peak, the boulder would inevitably slip from his grasp and roll back to the bottom, forcing him to start all over again. It's easy to feel a sense of deep futility just imagining this scenario. After all, isn't constant effort without reward one of humanity's greatest nightmares? Yet, French philosopher Albert Camus saw something deeply profound and even inspiring in the myth of Sisyphus. He saw it not just as a tale of punishment and endless torment, but rather as a powerful metaphor for the absurdity of human existence itself. To Camus, life inherently lacks absolute meaning or a guaranteed purpose. We, as human beings, are placed into a world that doesn't provide clear answers to our most urgent questions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of our lives? Why do we suffer and struggle only for our achievements to seem fleeting or temporary? This essential mismatch between our desire for clarity and meaning and the chaotic, indifferent reality we face is what Camus defined as the absurd. Now, you might wonder, if life truly is absurd and meaning isn't handed to us naturally, how can we go on? Should we surrender to despair or simply quit trying altogether? Camus' answer is bold and surprising. He argues that precisely because life is absurd, we have the ultimate freedom to create meaning ourselves. By fully accepting that our existence lacks intrinsic meaning, we're liberated from the unrealistic expectations of finding permanent fulfillment or achieving perfect outcomes. Camus famously wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." What he meant was that true freedom comes when we accept our daily struggles, not because they promise some final reward, but because they represent our continuous commitment to life itself. When we embrace life's absurdity without resistance, we gain strength in the very act of perseverance. This philosophical perspective holds immense practical significance for our daily lives. It challenges us to reconsider how we view our daily tasks, routines, and responsibilities. Think for a moment about your own daily boulders. Perhaps it's your job, where tasks never seem to fully end, or perhaps it's the endless responsibilities of family, studying, working out, or trying to maintain meaningful relationships. Often, these daily challenges can feel repetitive, thankless, or even pointless. But what if, instead of resenting these tasks, you could approach them as Sisyphus eventually must, embracing them for the intrinsic value they provide in simply doing your best day after day? Consider how liberating it would feel to detach your self-worth from outcomes that are ultimately outside your control. Instead of obsessing over final results, like promotions, recognition, social validation, or perfect outcomes, you could focus fully on the process itself, taking pride in your resilience, dedication, and commitment. Imagine the mental freedom of being satisfied, not solely by external results, but by your internal effort, character, and perseverance. Suddenly, the challenges that once seemed burdensome become vehicles through which you express your resilience and strength, no longer dependent on external rewards to justify their value. This doesn't mean you shouldn't set goals or strive for improvement, far from it. Instead, it means that you should approach goals as guides rather than ultimatums. Your fulfillment doesn't hinge solely on the achievement of distant targets. Rather, it's derived from your ongoing dedication and meaningful participation in life's journey itself. Camus encourages us to see the absurdity of life not as a reason for despair, but as an invitation to freedom. Freedom to choose our own meaning, to embrace our efforts regardless of final outcomes, and to joyfully participate in life's daily rituals. Practically speaking, you can implement this philosophical lesson into your daily life by actively shifting your mindset. When facing repetitive tasks, remind yourself that value lies in the doing itself. Next time you face your own symbolic boulder, pause for a moment to acknowledge your strength, your determination, and the simple dignity of engaging fully in your life. Appreciate small victories, moments of connection, progress, learning, and growth, without obsessing over whether they yield permanent or impressive outcomes. Learn to find joy and pride not in ultimate successes or praise, but in the daily act of showing up and giving your best effort. Think of Sisyphus again. Though condemned to eternal repetition, there is power in his relentless commitment. Each new attempt he makes embodies the resilient spirit of humanity, the strength to push forward despite knowing that perfect achievement is elusive. Like Sisyphus, we too can find dignity, even joy in our ceaseless pursuit of meaning, not because the struggle promises permanent success, but precisely because the struggle itself is meaningful. By embracing life's inherent absurdity, we free ourselves from anxiety over outcomes and find fulfillment in simply living each day with purpose, courage, and resilience. Imagine standing on the rocky shores of an island, imprisoned and dreaming desperately of freedom. This was precisely the situation for Icarus, the son of the brilliant craftsman Daedalus. According to the Greek myth, Daedalus was imprisoned along with his son Icarus on the island of Crete by the tyrannical king Minos. Yearning for freedom and escape, Daedalus conceived an extraordinary plan. He would build wings made from feathers held together by wax, allowing them to fly away and escape their captivity. Before their journey began, Daedalus carefully warned Icarus about the risks involved. Fly too low and the sea's spray will weigh down your wings, pulling you under. Fly too high and the sun's heat will melt the wax, sending you plunging back down to earth. With his father's careful instructions in mind, Icarus took flight, experiencing a freedom unlike anything he had ever known. At first, he heeded his father's advice, soaring gently above the waves, cautiously embracing his newfound freedom. But soon, exhilaration turned to recklessness. Consumed by the thrill of flight and a feeling of invincibility, he climbed higher and higher toward the blazing sun. Inevitably, the heat of the sun softened the wax binding his wings, and feathers began to loosen and fall away. In a tragic instant, joy turned to horror, and the young man plummeted into the sea, lost forever beneath its waves. This myth, though ancient, continues to resonate deeply because it captures the timeless tension between ambition and moderation, between taking risks and knowing our limits. It confronts us with a challenging question: how far should we pursue our dreams and ambitions? And when should we temper our desires with caution and humility? The story of Icarus is often interpreted as a warning against reckless ambition, reminding us of the potential consequences of unchecked aspiration. But if we delve deeper, it also cautions us against excessive caution, emphasizing the necessity of balance in all aspects of our lives. The tragedy of Icarus isn't simply that he fell, but that he was unable to strike the delicate balance between caution and daring, between moderation and ambition. In today's society, we often celebrate ambitious individuals who relentlessly chase big dreams and lofty goals. Ambition itself isn't inherently bad. Indeed, ambition drives innovation, personal growth, and meaningful change. But as the myth of Icarus powerfully illustrates, there's a fine line between courageous ambition and reckless overreach. When ambition spirals out of control, it can blind us to the risks involved, leading us to ignore wise advice, ignore warning signs, and make decisions driven by ego and arrogance rather than reason and humility. Ambition without humility becomes hubris, an inflated sense of self that inevitably leads to downfall. Yet, if ambition is tempered excessively, the opposite problem arises. We might remain trapped in comfort zones, never daring to challenge ourselves, explore new territories, or fully realize our potential. Daedalus's warning, "Don't fly too low or too high," embodies precisely this balance. In our personal and professional lives, maintaining the courage to take thoughtful risks is critical. It's what allows us to experience growth, pursue meaningful goals, and ultimately find genuine fulfillment. But equally crucial is developing the humility to understand our own limits, respect reality, and accept guidance from wiser or more experienced mentors around us. Practically speaking, how can we incorporate the lesson of Icarus into our daily lives. First, it begins with self-awareness. We must continually reflect on our motivations, honestly asking ourselves, am I driven by genuine passion and purpose, or am I chasing validation, status, or ego-driven success? The more honest we are about our intentions, the easier it becomes to set appropriate boundaries, embrace meaningful challenges, and prevent reckless behavior driven by pride or vanity. Self-awareness allows us to recognize when our ambitions become misguided or excessive, enabling us to adjust course before we risk falling disastrously. Second, we should embrace calculated risks while maintaining thoughtful limits. Responsible risk-taking doesn't mean avoiding challenges. It means deliberately evaluating risks, preparing accordingly, and approaching challenges with both courage and caution. Whether it's embarking on a new career, starting a business, pursuing an advanced degree, or exploring a new relationship, it's crucial to realistically assess both opportunities and potential consequences. Ambition should be channeled productively, accompanied by careful planning, ongoing feedback, and periodic reassessment of our goals. Instead of blindly racing toward our objectives, we should set meaningful checkpoints, staying open to advice, criticism, and adjustments along the way. Third, humility plays a critical role in balancing ambition. Humility reminds us that we are not infallible, that we make mistakes and sometimes misjudge situations. Adopting a humble mindset doesn't mean minimizing our strengths. Rather, it means being open to feedback, seeking guidance from others, and willingly learning from our experiences. Humility helps us navigate setbacks constructively, viewing mistakes as opportunities for growth rather than personal failures. If Icarus had tempered his excitement with humility and listened carefully to his father's guidance, he might have flown safely, enjoying freedom without catastrophe. Applying the lesson of Icarus means recognizing the value of moderation in relationships, careers, and life decisions. Just as flying too close to the sun can melt our metaphorical wings, allowing work, ambition, or personal goals to completely dominate our lives can harm relationships, health, and emotional well-being. Moderation ensures balance. It reminds us to allocate time and energy thoughtfully among career aspirations, personal passions, family, friendships, rest, and leisure. It helps us avoid burnout, loneliness, or regret, common consequences when we relentlessly chase goals without regard for balance and moderation. In essence, the myth of Icarus challenges us to thoughtfully balance ambition and humility throughout life. Ambition propels us forward, inspiring progress and accomplishment, while humility grounds us, providing essential checks and balances. Responsible risk-taking, guided by self-awareness and humility, enables us to navigate life's inevitable uncertainties, setbacks, and victories safely. Rather than avoiding ambition, the myth encourages us to approach our dreams thoughtfully, courageously, and wisely. Only by maintaining this delicate balance can we soar successfully, enjoying the exhilaration of achieving our potential without suffering catastrophic falls. In the early days of humanity, when the world was still fresh and untouched by suffering, the gods were not always generous. According to ancient Greek mythology, the Titan Prometheus had stolen fire from the gods and gifted it to humankind, an act that enraged Zeus, king of the gods. In retaliation, Zeus devised a plan, not one of brute force, but of temptation. He ordered the creation of the first mortal woman, Pandora. The gods bestowed upon her many gifts: beauty, grace, charm, music, and most importantly, an intense and irresistible curiosity. Along with Pandora, the gods gave her a sealed jar, commonly mistranslated as a box, and warned her never to open it. But as days passed, Pandora's curiosity grew. She wondered endlessly about what secrets the jar might contain. Why had it been given to her at all if she were never meant to open it? Eventually, unable to resist the temptation, she lifted the lid. In that moment, everything changed. Out of the jar flew disease, sorrow, greed, envy, anger, all the evils that would go on to plague humankind forever. Horrified, Pandora tried to close it, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. And yet, deep at the bottom of the jar, one thing remained: hope. This myth, as short and simple as it seems, carries an enormous weight of meaning. At its core, it's a story about the power and peril of curiosity, the inevitability of unintended consequences, and the enduring presence of hope. Pandora's tale reflects a universal truth. Human beings are naturally curious. We are drawn to the unknown, to the forbidden, to the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach. This impulse is not inherently bad. In fact, it's what drives discovery, invention, and growth. But like fire, curiosity must be handled with care. When left unchecked, it can lead us into dangerous territory, violating boundaries, disrupting balance, or unleashing consequences we never intended to face. In philosophy, this theme appears again and again. The Enlightenment, for example, was fueled by human curiosity, the desire to understand nature, society, and the self. But even in the pursuit of knowledge, thinkers warned against overstepping certain ethical and existential boundaries. The myth of Pandora acts as a cautionary tale, not to suppress curiosity but to wield it responsibly. It reminds us that every action has a ripple effect. Opening Pandora's box is not just about breaking rules or seeking forbidden knowledge. It's about the reality that even small, seemingly innocent choices can have profound and irreversible impacts on ourselves and others. In today's world, this lesson is more relevant than ever. We live in an age of instant information, boundless experimentation, and technological acceleration. We can ask almost any question and receive an answer within seconds. We have the ability to peer into private lives, access any part of the world, manipulate genetics, and explore digital landscapes previously unimaginable. Curiosity is no longer limited by physical space, it's endless, but with this abundance comes risk. What do we do with all this knowledge? How do we ensure that the doors we open are worth the consequences that may follow? Managing curiosity constructively begins with intent. Before pursuing something simply because we can, we should pause and ask why we want to know or experience it. Are we seeking truth, growth, connection? Or are we driven by impulse, voyeurism, or ego? Just as Pandora reached for the lid without considering what might lie within, we too are tempted by quick gratification or reckless exploration. But awareness is the key difference. When we slow down and think about the possible outcomes of our actions, whether it's clicking a link, confronting a loved one, experimenting with new lifestyles, or making a risky decision, we transform blind curiosity into conscious inquiry. Equally important is accepting that not all consequences can be predicted. Sometimes, even well-intentioned actions lead to pain, conflict, or loss. In those moments, the part of Pandora's myth that we often overlook becomes vital: hope. Despite all the evils that escaped the jar, hope remained. It wasn't crushed, corrupted, or destroyed. It waited quietly at the bottom, perhaps as a gift, perhaps as a reminder that no matter how bad things become, the human spirit is capable of enduring, adapting, and healing. Hope is not wishful thinking. It's not denial or naive optimism. Philosophically, hope is the capacity to envision a better future even when circumstances are bleak. It's what gives us the strength to keep moving forward after loss, to try again after failure, and to believe in the possibility of redemption, repair, or growth. In a world where we often open doors we later regret, whether through relationships, business ventures, or personal choices, hope is what keeps us from becoming cynical or paralyzed. It restores meaning when the chaos feels overwhelming. To embrace this lesson practically, we must learn how to navigate regret with responsibility. When you've made a choice that led to pain, opened your own Pandora's box, you don't need to deny it or run from it. Instead, you can face the consequences with courage, learn from what happened, and hold on to the hope that you are not defined by your mistakes. Growth doesn't come from always getting things right. It comes from facing what we've done, understanding why we did it, and using that knowledge to make better choices moving forward. In our relationships, this might mean pausing before saying something impulsive during a fight. Curiosity can make us want to get to the bottom of things or find the truth, but doing so recklessly can cause damage. In our careers, it might mean resisting the urge to pursue every shiny opportunity and instead focusing on what aligns with our values and long-term goals. In our personal lives, it might mean practicing digital mindfulness, resisting the endless scroll or the temptation to pry into others' lives out of boredom or insecurity. Finally, let's not forget that hope, just like curiosity, is something we can cultivate. It's not something we must passively wait to feel. It's something we practice. We foster hope by surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us, by engaging in meaningful work, by witnessing stories of resilience, and by believing on a deep, steady level that even when darkness enters our lives, light can follow. In the end, the myth of Pandora doesn't end with despair. It ends with hope quietly waiting at the bottom of the jar, a silent promise that no matter what we unleash, something within us is always capable of healing. So the next time you're about to open a box, whether it's exploring an idea, confronting a challenge, or stepping into the unknown, pause and reflect. Ask yourself not just, what could I gain, but also, what might this unleash? And whatever comes of it, remember, hope is always within reach. Even in the wake of chaos, we are not alone in our struggle, and the future remains open to change, redemption, and renewal. In Greek mythology, few figures are as iconic and universally recognized as Hercules. Strong, fearless, and nearly invincible, he wasn't just a hero in the physical sense. His story is one of suffering, endurance, and ultimately, redemption. What many forget is that Hercules' legendary feats didn't come from a place of glory or triumph. They came from deep personal tragedy. Driven mad by the goddess Hera, Hercules committed a horrific act. He killed his own wife and children in a fit of divine-induced madness. When he regained his senses and realized what he had done, he was consumed by guilt. To atone for this crime, he sought purification and was given a seemingly impossible sentence. He would have to complete 12 brutal labors, each more dangerous and overwhelming than the last. These weren't just physical challenges, they were symbolic of the inner torment and emotional burden he carried. Yet through each one, slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the golden hind, cleaning the Augean stables, he persisted. And in that persistence, Hercules became more than a tragic figure. He became a symbol of human resilience. At its core, the story of Hercules and his 12 labors is not just about strength, but about transformation through hardship. It's about what happens when you are broken, when you have lost everything, and when you are given a choice. Either collapse under the weight of your guilt and pain, or face the impossible, one step at a time. Philosophically, this tale speaks directly to the virtue of resilience, the ability to endure suffering and rise stronger because of it. Life doesn't always give us fair conditions. Sometimes we are thrown into situations we didn't ask for. We experience heartbreak, illness, failure, loss, and betrayal. And yet, like Hercules, we are still responsible for how we respond. That's the real power of his story, not that he was strong, but that he kept showing up again and again in the face of unbearable difficulty. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about what you do after you fall. When you've hit rock bottom, when you're exhausted, when the goal seems too far away, resilience is what allows you to get back up. It's not a magical trait you're born with, it's a discipline you build over time. Hercules didn't succeed because he felt confident every day. He succeeded because he didn't give up. Even when each labor seemed impossible, even when the gods mocked him, even when the path forward was unclear, he kept going. And this is perhaps the most essential lesson for anyone trying to grow, heal, or succeed in modern life. You don't have to be perfect to make progress. You just have to keep going. This lesson becomes especially relevant when we consider our own labors. You may not be asked to slay mythical beasts, but you might be fighting the long, slow battle of healing from trauma, overcoming addiction, building a business, finishing a degree, raising a child alone, or simply surviving in an environment that constantly challenges your peace of mind. These are not small tasks, they are your labors. And just like Hercules, they will test every ounce of your patience, endurance, and faith. But here's the thing. Every act of perseverance makes you stronger. Every day you show up and give your best despite pain, fear, or exhaustion is a day you move closer to reclaiming your power. We live in a culture that often glamorizes quick wins and overnight success, but the truth is that real growth is painfully slow. It happens in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, when no one applauds you, when no one even knows how much you're struggling. That's when your character is built. That's when you learn what you're really made of. Discipline is doing the right thing even when it's hard, boring, or thankless. It's waking up early to train, staying focused on your goals, and choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure. And the beautiful part is, the more you practice this, the more you transform not just your situation, but your identity. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who can face anything. Let's look more closely at a few of Hercules' labors, because each one carries a metaphor that can apply to your own life. Take, for example, the task of cleaning the Augean stables, a seemingly mundane job but a monumental one. These stables hadn't been cleaned in years and were filled with filth. Rather than scrubbing by hand, Hercules rerouted rivers to wash them out in one great surge. What does that teach us? That sometimes the only way to deal with long-ignored problems, emotional wounds, toxic habits, or stagnant situations is with radical action. It may not be glamorous, but facing the mess head-on is often the only way to create real, lasting change. Then there's the Hydra. Each time Hercules cut off one of its heads, 2 more would grow back. This monster symbolizes the kinds of problems that seem to multiply no matter how hard we try to eliminate them. Anxiety, addiction, negative thinking. Hercules had to learn that brute force alone wasn't enough. He eventually cauterized each neck to prevent new heads from growing. In your own life, it's a reminder that sometimes solving a problem means going deeper than the symptoms. It means addressing the root, changing your environment, your mindset, or your relationships. It's about being smart, not just strong. Perhaps the greatest transformation in Hercules' story is not that he completes the labors, but that he reclaims his sense of self. His journey is one of redemption, not just in the eyes of the gods, but within his own conscience. Through struggle he earns peace, through effort he earns forgiveness. And that's what resilience does for us too. It teaches us that even if we've made mistakes, even if we've done things we're not proud of, there is always a path back. That path is built not in a day, but step by step, labor by labor. To apply this in your daily life, ask yourself, what is your next labor? What difficult task or uncomfortable conversation have you been avoiding? What personal challenge requires not a burst of energy, but consistent effort over time? Start small. Commit to showing up daily, not perfectly but intentionally. Track your progress, celebrate small wins. Build discipline like a muscle, one rep, one choice, one step at a time. And when you fail, and you will, get back up. Remember that every hero's journey includes setbacks, doubts, and moments of despair. What defines the hero is not that they never suffer, but that they never stop moving forward. The myth of Hercules reminds us that even the most broken person can find redemption. Even the most impossible challenges can be overcome, not with ease, but with resilience. Your suffering doesn't disqualify you from greatness. If anything, it prepares you for it. So embrace the struggle, lean into the labor, and remember that you are not alone in your battle. Like Hercules, you have the strength within you to face whatever comes. Keep going, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. In the ancient world of Greek mythology, where gods ruled over mortals with unchallenged power, one figure stood apart for his daring defiance: Prometheus. He was a titan, older than the Olympian gods themselves, and unlike many of his kind, he had a special fondness for humanity. According to the myth, in the earliest days, humans lived in a primitive state, cold, vulnerable, and ignorant of many of the tools that would later define civilization. Fire, a symbol of both warmth and knowledge, was kept by the gods and forbidden to man. Without it, humanity remained powerless, subject to the whims of nature and the darkness of night. Prometheus saw this and chose to act. In a bold and rebellious gesture, he stole fire from Mount Olympus and gave it to humanity, defying Zeus, the king of the gods. It was an act of immense risk, one that would change the world forever. But the punishment was brutal. For this transgression, Zeus chained Prometheus to a rock where each day an eagle would descend to tear out his liver, only for it to grow back overnight, making the torment endless. Prometheus' story is one of the most profound in Greek mythology, not just because of his suffering, but because of what it represents. Fire in this myth is not just a tool, it is a symbol of knowledge, creativity, and progress. By stealing it, Prometheus didn't just break a rule, he broke a hierarchy. He disrupted the natural order of power, favoring growth and advancement for the weak over control by the strong. In this light, Prometheus becomes much more than a mythic figure. He becomes a timeless symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the human spirit's refusal to accept ignorance or oppression. His myth speaks to the heart of every person who's ever challenged the status quo, questioned unjust authority, or risked safety to bring light to others. The philosophical lesson here is rich with meaning. At its core, Prometheus' story is about moral rebellion, the kind of rebellion that isn't selfish or chaotic, but rooted in compassion and vision. He sees the suffering of others and chooses to act, knowing he will suffer in return. That's the kind of courage that isn't loud or dramatic, but deeply ethical. It's the courage of those who stand up for justice, invent new paths forward, or challenge the rules when those rules hurt more than they help. Socrates echoed this Promethean courage centuries later, when he chose to die rather than stop questioning the world around him. Galileo showed it when he challenged the Church's view of the universe. Countless thinkers, creators, and reformers throughout history have carried the torch Prometheus lit, often paying a steep price for doing so. But this myth also touches on something deeply modern: the cost of innovation. In a world that values comfort, tradition, and control, innovation is often perceived as a threat. Those who try to introduce new ways of thinking or living, Whether it's inventing new technology, reimagining education, advocating for social reform, or even challenging outdated norms, often face resistance. Not because they're wrong, but because change is uncomfortable. Prometheus knew that giving humans fire would shift the balance of power, and that's exactly why Zeus punished him. He wasn't just punishing the theft, he was punishing the idea that humanity could rise above its assigned place. In practical terms, this lesson invites us to look at our own lives and ask, where am I being called to bring fire? That fire might be an idea you've been afraid to share, a project that seems too bold, a truth you're hesitant to speak aloud, or a change you want to make in your community, career, or relationships. Too often we silence ourselves because we fear consequences, judgment, failure, or rejection. But Prometheus shows us that meaningful change is rarely comfortable and never risk-free. True innovation asks for courage, it demands sacrifice, and it requires that we care more about progress than approval. Of course, not everyone is called to rebel against gods or institutions. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is to challenge your own limitations, to break free from the mental chains that keep you stuck in place, to stop waiting for permission to grow. When you choose to learn a new skill, start a creative project, leave a toxic environment, or speak your truth in a world that prefers silence, you are embodying the Promethean spirit. You are choosing to light a fire not just for yourself, but for others who are still sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to show them the way. This myth also reminds us that sacrifice is part of the process. We live in a culture obsessed with immediate gratification and risk-free results. But any path worth walking will cost you something: time, energy, security, sometimes even relationships. Prometheus teaches us that suffering isn't always a sign you've made a mistake. Sometimes it's the clearest sign you're on the right track. His pain wasn't meaningless. It was the cost of giving others something priceless. The question is, what are you willing to suffer for? What vision, value, or mission are you committed to, even when it hurts? It's important too to acknowledge the danger of stagnation. Without people like Prometheus, who challenge and push the boundaries, humanity would remain in a state of dependency and darkness. Fire transformed the human world. It led to cooking, warmth, protection, industry, and eventually, civilization. In your own life, what fire are you withholding because of fear? What gift are you keeping to yourself because someone told you it's not practical, safe, or acceptable? The world needs people willing to create, to light new paths, ask new questions, and build things that haven't been built before. That might mean writing a book, launching a business, starting a conversation no one else wants to have, or simply living more authentically in a world that prefers conformity. But courage doesn't mean recklessness. Prometheus didn't steal fire impulsively. He did it with purpose, knowing exactly why it mattered. Innovation must be grounded in vision and responsibility. This isn't about burning things down just to feel powerful. It's about understanding what needs to change, why it matters, and who it will serve. True innovators aren't interested in chaos. They're interested in transformation. Lastly, we can take comfort in knowing that Prometheus' story doesn't end in despair. In some versions of the myth, he is eventually freed by Hercules, another hero of resilience. This hints at a deeper truth. Sacrifice and suffering may be part of the journey, but they are not the end. When we act with integrity and courage, even when we face backlash, we plant seeds for a better future, seeds that someone else may help nurture and free. Just as Hercules came along generations later, the results of our actions may blossom long after we're gone. So, what will you do with your fire? Will you keep it hidden, afraid of what might happen if you share it? Or will you light the path for yourself and others, even if it costs you something? Prometheus reminds us that the world changes not through comfort, but through courage. That progress doesn't come from obedience, but from vision. And that the greatest gift we can give the world is not our silence, but our spark. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the most hauntingly beautiful myths in all of Greek mythology. It's not a tale of war or gods or grand heroism. It's a quiet tragedy about love, loss, and the human struggle to accept what cannot be undone. Orpheus was a poet and musician whose talent was so powerful that even the stones and trees would move to hear his music. He fell deeply in love with Eurydice, a woman of such grace and kindness that their union seemed to exist in a world untouched by sorrow. But fate can be cruel. Soon after their wedding, Eurydice was bitten by a venomous snake and died, her soul descending into the underworld. Devastated, Orpheus refused to accept her death. He could not let go. He played songs of such sorrow and longing that even the gods wept. Moved by his grief, they allowed him to travel to the realm of the dead to try and retrieve her. In the underworld, Orpheus played his lyre with such aching beauty that Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the dead, granted him a rare chance. Eurydice could return with him to the world of the living under one condition. He must walk in front of her, and he must not look back until they had both fully emerged into the light. It was a simple instruction, but a test of trust and restraint. And so Orpheus began his journey back to the surface, Eurydice walking silently behind him. Step by step, they climbed through the darkness. But just as the first light of the living world touched Orpheus's face, doubt crept in. What if she wasn't really behind him? What if the gods had tricked him? What if he had lost her again and didn't even know it? Unable to bear the uncertainty, he turned around, and in that instant, Eurydice vanished forever. This myth captures something painfully real, the way grief and uncertainty can lead us to sabotage the very things we hope to preserve. Orpheus's act of turning around wasn't just a physical movement. It was a moment of emotional weakness, of needing confirmation, of not being able to live with not knowing. And that's what makes this myth so profound. It reflects the human tendency to look back, to cling to what is lost, to seek closure, to try and undo the irreversible. But sometimes, the more we try to hold on, the more we suffer. Sometimes, healing begins only when we stop looking back. Philosophically, this story invites us into the painful but necessary work of acceptance. We all experience loss in some form. Loss of loved ones, relationships, dreams, opportunities. And in the face of that loss, the mind rebels. We replay moments, imagine different outcomes, ask endless what-ifs. Like Orpheus, we walk forward while constantly glancing backward, hoping that somehow our gaze can bring back what has already slipped away. But the truth is, we cannot rewrite the past. What's done is done. The more we resist this, the more we prolong our suffering. Letting go, however, does not mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the loss never mattered. Acceptance is not about erasing the past. It's about acknowledging reality without constantly trying to reshape it. It's the quiet strength of saying, "This hurts, I miss them, I wish it were different, but I cannot change it, and I will not allow my pain to define my future." That's the real test Orpheus failed, not because he didn't love Eurydice, but because he couldn't trust life enough to move forward without certainty. In daily life, many of us struggle with our own versions of this myth. Maybe we keep checking on someone who left us, rereading old messages, or hoping for an apology that may never come. Maybe we dwell on a mistake that cost us an opportunity, replaying it in our minds as if we could somehow will it into reversing itself. Or maybe we refuse to move on from a dream that didn't come true, convinced that letting go would mean we failed. But clinging to the past doesn't keep us safe, it keeps us stuck. Like Orpheus, we risk losing the beauty and possibility that exists ahead of us by constantly turning back toward what we cannot change. So how do we let go gracefully? First, by allowing ourselves to feel the loss. Suppressing grief only delays healing. Let yourself mourn what was lost, whether it's a person, a relationship, a version of yourself. Speak about it, write about it, cry about it. There is strength in vulnerability. But after the grieving comes the choice, to keep reliving the story or to write a new one. Acceptance begins with the decision to live again, to re-engage with the world, even if it's been scarred by pain. Second, we must learn to sit with uncertainty. Orpheus's mistake was rooted in doubt. He needed proof that Eurydice was behind him. In our own lives, we crave closure, explanations, guarantees. But the truth is, much of life is uncertain. We don't always get clear answers or tidy endings. Sometimes we must trust without seeing the full picture. We must walk forward knowing that some questions may never be answered, and that's okay. Inner peace is not found in certainty, but in our willingness to move forward anyway. Third, acceptance requires compassion for ourselves and others. Loss often brings regret. We wonder what we could have done differently, but punishing ourselves for the past doesn't change it. It only adds another layer of pain. Self-compassion means saying, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time, and that's all any of us can ever do. Forgiveness, both for ourselves and those who hurt us, is not about condoning harm. It's about freeing ourselves from its grip. Lastly, this myth reminds us of the power of love even in loss. Orpheus loved Eurydice deeply. That love didn't die with her disappearance. It lived on in his music, in his story, in the hearts of those who hear it today. The people we lose don't vanish completely. Their impact remains in how they shaped us, what they taught us, how we live because of them. Moving on doesn't mean erasing that connection. It means honoring it in a way that lets us continue living. So when you find yourself haunted by the past, tempted to look back, remember Orpheus. Remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep walking forward, even when you're not sure what's behind you. Letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the strength to say, I cannot change what was, but I can shape what comes next. Loss will visit all of us, but acceptance, when we're ready, can be the beginning of something new, not the end of something old. Keep moving, keep trusting, and know that every step forward is a quiet act of courage. Proof that you are still alive, still growing, and still capable of creating something beautiful, even after everything you've lost. In a quiet forest glade surrounded by still water and delicate wildflowers, there once lived a young man named Narcissus, whose beauty was unmatched. According to Greek mythology, Narcissus was so stunning that people from far and wide would come just to gaze upon him. But he was cold, distant, and indifferent to the love of others. He rejected every admirer with cruelty and pride, believing no one could ever be worthy of him. Then one day, while wandering alone through the woods, he bent down to drink from a clear spring. In the surface of the water, he saw a face so captivating, so flawless, that he instantly fell in love. Not realizing it was his own reflection, he became entranced, unable to look away, unable to touch or embrace the object of his affection. He stayed there, frozen, longing for a love he could never have. Eventually he wasted away, consumed by obsession, and died at the edge of the pool, still staring at himself. In the place where he had fallen, a delicate white flower grew, forever bearing his name, the Narcissus. This story is more than a simple warning about vanity. It's a deep exploration of how unchecked self-obsession can lead to isolation, delusion, and ultimately, self-destruction. Narcissus didn't just admire himself, he fell in love with a false image, mistaking appearance for substance. He couldn't look away because he believed that reflection was him, yet it was nothing more than a surface, an illusion. The myth holds a mirror up to us and asks, how often do we chase our own reflections? How often do we become enamored with an image of ourselves, whether it's our physical appearance, our social media profiles, our reputation, and forget to engage with the real world, the people around us, or even our true selves? Philosophically, this myth serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of ego, vanity, and the pursuit of self without depth. It reminds us that self-love, when inflated and detached from reality, can turn toxic. There is a difference between confidence and arrogance, between self-respect and self-worship. When we place our entire worth in how we appear to others, or even how we appear to ourselves, we risk becoming like Narcissus, mesmerized by the surface but hollow underneath. The more we curate an image of perfection, the harder it becomes to look inward, to face our flaws, or to build genuine relationships. Instead of growing, we become trapped, staring into a pool of our own reflection, searching for love in an illusion. In modern life, this story feels more relevant than ever. We live in an era dominated by images, selfies, profile pictures, status updates, likes, and followers. We're encouraged, even rewarded, for projecting polished versions of ourselves. We filter our faces, edit our lives, and market our personalities like brands. But in the pursuit of looking good, we often lose touch with being real. Narcissus would thrive on Instagram, but he'd also be deeply lonely, disconnected, and spiritually starved. The myth warns us not to confuse attention with connection or appearance with worth. When we value ourselves solely based on external validation, we become fragile. We're happy only when we're praised, and devastated when we're ignored. The danger here is subtle. It doesn't always show up as obvious arrogance. Sometimes narcissism disguises itself as insecurity, overcompensation, or the constant need to prove ourselves. We obsess over how we're perceived. Did they like my post? Did I sound smart? Do I look successful enough? And slowly, our identity becomes shaped by mirrors, what others reflect back to us, instead of what we truly value, believe, and feel. Narcissus was cursed not just with beauty, but with blindness, the inability to look beyond the surface, even his own. So how do we avoid falling into this trap? How do we develop genuine self-awareness without getting lost in self-obsession? The first step is recognizing the signs. Ask yourself, am I more focused on how I look than how I act? Do I spend more time curating an image than cultivating my character? Do I seek validation more than I seek truth? These aren't always easy questions to answer, but they're necessary. Self-reflection must go beyond the surface. It's not about judging yourself harshly, it's about being honest. Narcissism grows in the absence of honest self-examination, but awareness, real deep awareness, is how we break the spell. The second step is practicing humility. This doesn't mean putting yourself down or denying your strengths. It means understanding that you are one person among many, that your worth isn't greater or lesser than anyone else's, and that you don't need to be extraordinary to be valuable. Humility keeps us grounded. It helps us appreciate others, ask for help, admit mistakes, and stay open to growth. Narcissus couldn't connect with others because he saw himself as above them. But the truth is, we grow most through connection, through the honest, sometimes messy process of learning from others and being vulnerable with them. The third step is building identity from the inside out. That means focusing less on how you're seen and more on who you are. What are your values? What do you care about when no one's watching? What kind of person are you when you're not performing? Real confidence doesn't come from applause. It comes from integrity. When your actions align with your values, when you live with purpose and honesty, you don't need mirrors to tell you who you are. That's the antidote to narcissism, not self-hatred, but authentic self-knowledge. Finally, develop empathy. One of the saddest parts of Narcissus' story is that he couldn't love anyone else. He was incapable of recognizing or valuing the feelings of others. True self-awareness includes an understanding of how we affect the people around us. Are we kind? Are we listening? Are we building others up, or using them to reflect our own worth? Narcissism is a closed loop, me, me, me. But empathy breaks that loop. It opens us up to the experiences, joys, and sufferings of others. It teaches us to look outward, not just inward, and to find meaning in connection, not just admiration. The story of Narcissus is a mirror held up to all of us. It challenges us to look deeper, to question our relationship with ourselves, and to remember that true beauty isn't something we see in a reflection. It's something we cultivate in our actions, our thoughts, and our relationships. Self-love is important, but it must be balanced by humility, awareness, and compassion. Otherwise, we risk becoming trapped in a fantasy, blind to the real world, and ultimately blind to ourselves. So ask yourself, am I chasing a reflection, or am I building a self I can truly respect? Am I looking outward for approval, or inward for direction? The path away from narcissism is not shame, it's awareness. It's the daily practice of turning away from the pool and toward real life. Because in the end, we don't find ourselves in mirrors. We find ourselves in moments, in growth, in connection, in truth. And those are the things no reflection can ever show. In the rich world of Greek mythology, the tale of King Midas stands out as a parable that feels strikingly modern. It's the story of a man who had everything, wealth, power, status, but still wanted more. Midas was a king with an obsession: gold. He adored it, hoarded it, and measured his success by how much of it he possessed. One day, after showing kindness to the god Dionysus by taking care of his companion Silenus, Midas was offered a reward. Without hesitation, he asked that everything he touched be turned to gold. Dionysus granted the wish, warning Midas to consider the consequences. At first it seemed like a dream come true. Midas turned stones into gold, furniture into treasure, flowers into sparkling ornaments. But the wonder quickly turned into horror. When he reached for food, it turned to gold, impossible to eat. When he embraced his daughter, she too became a lifeless golden statue. His blessing had become a curse, his wealth a prison. Starving, grief-stricken and broken, Midas begged the gods to take back the gift. Eventually, they took pity on him and reversed the wish. He had learned too late the painful cost of greed. This story is more than just a warning against wanting too much. It's a deep reflection on the illusion of wealth and the danger of defining our lives through material success. Midas believed that by having more gold he would be happier, more powerful, more fulfilled. But he misunderstood a basic truth about human nature: that fulfillment does not come from what we accumulate, but from what we experience, especially our connections with others. When everything he touched turned to gold, even love and nourishment became lifeless. The very things that made life worth living, food, touch, family, were stripped of meaning. In trying to make everything valuable, he made everything empty. Philosophically, the myth of Midas challenges us to think about what we truly value and how we measure success. Materialism, in its essence, is the belief that happiness can be found in external possessions, in things we can own, show off, or use to elevate our status. It's an appealing belief, especially in a world that constantly advertises comfort, luxury, and abundance as the ultimate goals. But like Midas, we often chase material wealth thinking it will fill the void inside us, only to discover that it leaves us more isolated, anxious, and disconnected than before. The more we rely on stuff to make us happy, the more fragile our happiness becomes, because things can be lost, stolen, outdated, or broken. And when our self-worth is tied to what we own, we're always one step away from feeling worthless. We see this all the time today. People working endless hours to afford bigger houses or fancier cars, only to be too exhausted or distracted to enjoy them. Social media flooded with curated images of luxury lifestyles, vacations, watches, designer clothes, all signaling that this is what success looks like. But behind many of those images are people feeling unfulfilled, chasing likes instead of love, and struggling with the constant pressure to do more, buy more, and be more. It's the modern version of the golden touch. We turn experiences into content, relationships into networking opportunities, and identities into brands. And in the process, we risk losing what really matters. So what's the alternative? How do we live wisely in a world that glorifies material success? The first step is to redefine what wealth means to you. True wealth is not just financial, it's emotional, relational, intellectual, and spiritual. It's the depth of your friendships, the health of your mind and body, the peace you feel when you're alone, the joy of meaningful work, and the sense of purpose that guides your actions. Ask yourself, what makes me feel truly alive? What memories do I cherish most? Chances are it's not things, it's moments. Conversations, challenges overcome, people you love. These are the real treasures and they can't be bought. Second, practice gratitude. One of the reasons Midas wanted more was because he couldn't appreciate what he already had. He had a kingdom, a daughter, a comfortable life, but it wasn't enough. Gratitude grounds us in the present. It helps us notice what's good, even when life isn't perfect. When we take time to appreciate the little things, a warm meal, a kind word, a quiet moment, we become less driven by the constant urge for more. And ironically, the more grateful we are, the richer we feel. Third, invest in relationships, not just resources. Midas' story takes a tragic turn when he turns his own daughter into gold. That moment is symbolic of what happens when we prioritize wealth over people. In real life, we may not turn loved ones into statues, but we can neglect them, use them, or lose them when we chase success too blindly. Relationships take time, presence, and care. They require attention, not just money. And in the end, it's those connections that give our lives the deepest meaning. Fourth, embrace simplicity. Simplicity doesn't mean deprivation, it means choosing what matters most and letting go of what distracts. When we declutter our lives physically, mentally, emotionally, we create space for clarity and joy. You don't need to give up all your possessions or live in a cabin in the woods, but maybe you don't need 10 pairs of shoes. Maybe you don't need to upgrade your phone every year. Maybe you don't need to say yes to every opportunity if it costs you your peace. Living simply is about aligning your life with your values, not society's expectations. Finally, remember that value is not the same as price. Gold is valuable, but it's not everything. Some things, like love, kindness, creativity, honesty, can't be measured in dollars, but they change lives. When Midas turned everything to gold, he learned that not all that glitters is good. The most precious parts of life are often the ones we overlook when we're too focused on getting ahead. The myth of King Midas is a timeless reminder that more is not always better. That having everything means nothing if we lose the ability to enjoy, to feel, to connect. It's not a condemnation of success or wealth, but a call for balance. You can pursue your goals, earn money, and enjoy nice things, but let them serve your life, not define it. Let your wealth be a tool for generosity, not just accumulation. Let your ambition be guided by purpose, not ego. So the next time you find yourself chasing the golden touch, more stuff, more status, more recognition, pause and ask, at what cost? Will this bring me closer to the life I want or further from what really matters? What would I trade to keep what I already have? And am I living in a way that, if everything turned to gold, I'd still feel full inside? Because the truth is, life's real value isn't in what you touch, but in how you live. And if we can remember that, we can avoid Midas's curse and instead create lives of depth, meaning, and true abundance. Deep within the twisting corridors of the labyrinth, a maze so complex that no one who entered could ever find their way out, lurked a monster. Half man, half bull, the Minotaur was a terrifying creature, the embodiment of rage, isolation, and raw power. Every year, as punishment and tribute to King Minos of Crete, Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to be devoured by the beast. It was a sentence of fear and shame for the Athenians, until one man, Theseus, decided he would end it. He volunteered to go, not out of arrogance, but because he believed the cycle of terror had to be broken. With only a sword and a ball of thread given to him by Ariadne, King Minos' daughter, Theseus entered the labyrinth. He left a trail of thread behind him so he could find his way back and venture deep into the darkness, where he finally confronted the Minotaur and killed it, ending the cruel sacrifices and bringing hope back to Athens. On the surface, this might seem like a classic hero's tale. Courage, cleverness, victory over a beast. But symbolically, the labyrinth and the Minotaur are much more than that. They represent the inner world, our hidden fears, traumas, insecurities, and destructive patterns. The labyrinth is the confusing, winding network of thoughts and emotions we often find ourselves lost in. The Minotaur is the part of us we're afraid to face. Our anger, our addictions, our shame, our shadow. Theseus's journey is not just through a physical maze, it's a journey into the unknown corners of the self. And the real victory isn't just slaying the beast, but confronting it head-on, refusing to run, and finding a way out with clarity and courage. Philosophically, this myth speaks to the necessity of inner confrontation. We all have a labyrinth. We all have a Minotaur. Most of us spend our lives avoiding them, distracting ourselves with noise, burying uncomfortable thoughts, numbing emotions, or projecting our fears onto others. But those strategies don't eliminate the monster, they just leave it lurking in the dark, growing stronger. The more we avoid our inner demons, the more power they have over us. Anxiety, for instance, often grows when we refuse to name it. Resentment festers when we deny it. Trauma lingers when we suppress it. But when we shine a light into the labyrinth, when we're brave enough to look inward, something changes. We see that the monster isn't as untouchable as we thought. It has a shape, a story, a beginning, and most importantly, it can be faced. Theseus didn't walk into the labyrinth blindly. He had a plan, the thread. This detail, while often overlooked, is one of the most profound symbols in the entire myth. The thread represents self-awareness, or what the ancient Greeks might call notiseoton, know thyself. It's the lifeline that keeps us grounded when we venture into deep emotional territory. Without the thread, you may defeat your demon, but never find your way back. You may confront your fears but get lost in them. The thread ensures that we don't lose our sense of identity while exploring the more chaotic, painful, or shadowy parts of ourselves. So how do we apply this in real life? How do we face our own internal minotaurs without being overwhelmed? The first step is naming the beast. You can't fight what you won't face, and you can't face what you refuse to name. Take a moment to identify your inner struggles. Is it self-doubt, guilt, fear of failure, chronic anger, insecurity in relationships, addiction to validation? Don't judge yourself for having them. Acknowledge them with honesty. We often think our demons make us weak or broken, but the opposite is true. Everyone has them. Facing them is what makes us strong. Second, create your thread, your path of return. This could be a daily journal, a meditation practice, therapy, trusted friends, or a personal philosophy that keeps you grounded. Your thread is anything that helps you stay centered while you explore the deeper layers of your inner world. When you start reflecting on your past, your wounds, or your behavioral patterns, it's easy to spiral into blame, shame, or confusion. That's why you need something that reminds you of who you are beyond your pain, something that keeps you tethered while you go deeper. Third, confront the Minotaur, not with violence, but with understanding. Facing your inner demons doesn't always mean defeating them. It often means understanding where they come from. Why do you react with rage when you feel disrespected? Why do you pull away when someone gets close? Why do you chase perfection or feel like you're never enough? These behaviors didn't appear out of nowhere. They were formed by experiences, often ones we didn't choose. By tracing the origin of our patterns, we loosen their grip. The Minotaur, in many ways, is just a wounded part of ourselves, guarding pain that's never been healed. Understanding it doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it gives us the power to change it. Fourth, take small, consistent actions toward healing. Inner work is not a one-time battle, it's a practice. You don't go into the labyrinth once and come out completely transformed. You go in again and again, each time you return with a little more strength, a little more clarity. Set goals that are realistic, build habits that support your growth, celebrate progress no matter how small. Maybe it's speaking up when you'd normally stay silent. Maybe it's being kinder to yourself. Maybe it's pausing before reacting. These are modern-day victories in the labyrinth. Fifth, seek support. Theseus didn't enter the labyrinth completely alone. He had Ariadne, someone who believed in him, who helped him find his way. In your own journey, don't underestimate the power of guidance. Whether it's a mentor, a therapist, a friend, or a supportive community. Inner struggles often isolate us, but healing happens faster when we're not doing it all on our own. Vulnerability can be scary, but it's how connection and real transformation begins. Lastly, remember that the point is not perfection, it's progress. You may not defeat your inner Minotaur in one moment, 1 month, or even 1 year. But the fact that you're willing to step into your labyrinth, to confront the uncomfortable, to try and understand yourself, that already sets you apart. That is the journey of a warrior. And like Theseus, each time you face the darkness and come back with more wisdom, more strength, and more peace, you're not just surviving, you're evolving. In the end, the story of Theseus and the Minotaur isn't about slaying a monster. It's about reclaiming power. Power over fear. Power over confusion. Power over the parts of ourselves we've been too afraid to confront. The labyrinth exists within all of us. So does the Minotaur, but so does the hero, so does the thread, and so does the light waiting at the other end, if we're brave enough to walk toward it. In the ancient world of Greek mythology, there are few stories more enduring than the Odyssey, a long, winding tale of a man named Odysseus and his relentless quest to return home. After the fall of Troy, Odysseus set sail for Ithaca, where his wife Penelope and son Telemachus await him. But what should have been a straightforward voyage turns into a 10-year epic filled with detours, dangers, and delays. He faces monsters like the Cyclops, temptations like the Sirens, wrathful gods, shipwrecks, betrayals, and heartbreaking losses. Time and again, just when it seems he's close to home, something pulls him farther away. Yet Odysseus never gives up. He keeps going, not because the journey is easy, but because he knows that home, however far it may be, is worth fighting for. And when he finally returns, it's not the same man who left Troy. He's older, wiser, battle-worn, and deeply transformed. This myth is not just about physical travel. It's about the nature of life itself. Odysseus' journey is symbolic of the path we all walk. It's long, unpredictable, filled with triumphs and tragedies, allies and enemies, clarity and confusion. We set goals, personal, professional, emotional, and imagine a straight line between where we are and where we want to be. But reality is rarely so simple. We get sidetracked. Things fall apart. Unexpected challenges test us. Sometimes we feel like we're moving backwards. But that's the point of the Odyssey. It's not a story about speed, it's a story about growth. Odysseus becomes a hero not just by reaching Ithaca, but by surviving everything it took to get there. His journey is what makes him who he is. Philosophically, the Odyssey teaches us to stop seeing life as a destination. In the modern world, we're obsessed with outcomes. We're told to find our purpose, to reach success, to get the dream job, the perfect relationship, the ideal body, the recognition we think we deserve. We treat life like a checklist. But that mindset creates anxiety and disappointment, because as soon as we reach one goal, another appears. And if we believe that happiness lies only at the end of the road, we miss the meaning of everything that happens along the way. The Odyssey reminds us that the journey itself is the real story, the struggles we endure, the mistakes we make, the lessons we learn, and the person we become through it all. One of the most profound aspects of Odysseus' journey is that he doesn't always make the right choices. He's clever and brave, but also proud, reckless, and sometimes arrogant. He gets his men killed, he angers gods, he stays too long in places he shouldn't, but these flaws make him real and relatable. Like all of us, he grows through trial and error. His wisdom doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from surviving, from adapting, from learning through pain, and this is one of the core messages of the Odyssey. That wisdom isn't something we're born with, it's something we earn, slowly, through experience, through hardship, through reflection. In everyday life, this has massive implications. We often expect ourselves to figure everything out quickly, to know exactly what we're doing, where we're going, and how to get there. And when things go wrong, we panic. We assume we're behind or failing. But what if the wrong turn is part of the path? What if the delays, the struggles, the confusion that we usually resist are exactly what we need in order to grow? What if we stopped rushing through life and started paying attention to it? When we embrace this idea, we give ourselves permission to live more fully. We stop measuring our worth by how far along we are and start focusing on how present we are. We become more open to change, more accepting of failure, and more compassionate with ourselves. Odysseus didn't reach Ithaca by racing, he reached it by enduring, and each experience, even the painful ones, taught him something essential. The lotus eaters taught him about the danger of complacency. The Cyclops taught him about the price of pride. Circe and Calypso taught him about temptation. The Sirens taught him that wisdom means knowing your limits. Each moment mattered. Each chapter shaped him. So how do we apply this to our own lives? First, we must reframe how we think about progress. Instead of asking how close am I to the goal, we should ask, what am I learning from this moment? That shift in focus changes everything. It turns setbacks into teachers. It turns failure into feedback. It reminds us that every experience, good or bad, is part of our becoming. Second, we must slow down and notice the journey. In our rush to get somewhere, we often miss what's happening right in front of us. We don't appreciate the people who support us, the small wins, or even the quiet moments of rest. But these moments are not meaningless. They are the heartbeat of life. The Odyssey isn't remembered because Odysseus got home. It's remembered because of what happened along the way. Your story will be remembered the same way. Third, we must develop resilience. Odysseus faced storms, monsters, betrayals, and still kept going. Life is unpredictable. Plans will fall apart. People will disappoint us. We will disappoint ourselves. But resilience means returning again and again, even when the odds are against you. It means trusting that as long as you're still moving, you're still becoming. You're still in the story. Fourth, we must honor our inner Ithaca. For Odysseus, Ithaca wasn't just a place, it was a symbol of belonging, love, and truth. We all have our own version of Ithaca, a state of being where we feel aligned with who we truly are. It's not about fame or wealth, it's about peace, about authenticity, about feeling at home in your own soul. That's what you're really moving toward. And the closer you get, the more you realize it was never just about reaching Ithaca, it was about remembering who you were the whole time. Finally, we must remember that we're all on our own odyssey. We are all navigating our own labyrinths, facing our own monsters, making our way through life's unpredictable seas. And it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to be lost sometimes. What matters is that you keep going, that you keep growing, that you treat your journey with the reverence it deserves. Because this path you're on, no matter how winding, no matter how difficult, is not a mistake. It's your becoming. So wherever you are in your journey right now, whether you're just setting sail, stuck on a lonely island, lost in a storm, or finally catching a glimpse of home, remember, the road you're walking is shaping you in ways you can't yet see. Trust it, learn from it, honor it, and know that the hero in you is not the one who finishes fastest, but the one who refuses to quit. The Odyssey lives on because it reminds us of something we all need to hear. Life is not about the destination, it's about the journey, and every step, no matter how hard, is part of the story that makes you whole. We've just journeyed through 10 of the most powerful Greek myths, stories that, despite being thousands of years old, still echo with surprising clarity in our modern lives. Each myth, each character, each trial has offered not just entertainment, but timeless philosophical truths, reminders of what it means to be human, to struggle, to grow, and to find meaning along the way. We began with Sisyphus, endlessly pushing his boulder uphill, only to have it roll back down. His tale taught us that life's meaning isn't in the reward, but in the effort itself, that perseverance, even in the face of futility, can be its own kind of triumph. Then came Icarus, flying too close to the sun. From his fall, we learned the necessity of balancing ambition with humility, how chasing greatness is noble, but only when tempered by awareness of our limits. Pandora opened her jar, unleashing sorrow into the world, but also releasing hope. Her myth reminded us of the double-edged sword of curiosity and the importance of staying anchored in optimism, even when life turns dark. From Hercules, we drew strength. His 12 labors were more than feats of strength. They were a symbol of resilience, of taking responsibility for your past and transforming pain into purpose through disciplined action. Prometheus, the firebringer, risked everything to light the way for humanity. He showed us the courage it takes to challenge unjust systems, and how true progress often requires sacrifice from those brave enough to speak truth to power. We descended into the underworld with Orpheus, only to watch him lose Eurydice again. In his moment of weakness, we saw the deep human difficulty of letting go, and how sometimes healing only comes through acceptance. Narcissus taught us about the dangers of ego and self-obsession, how easy it is to fall in love with our image, and how real growth requires humility, self-awareness, and genuine connection to others. With King Midas, we were reminded that greed can hollow out even the richest life. That fulfillment doesn't lie in gold or possessions, but in love, in presence, and in learning to value what can't be bought. Theseus, who braved the labyrinth, showed us how to face our inner demons, how courage is not just physical but psychological, and how we each must navigate our own mental mazes with honesty and intention. And finally, Odysseus taught us that life is a journey, not a destination, that wisdom is earned through struggle, and that every obstacle is part of the path that shapes who we are becoming. So, which myth spoke to you the most? Which lesson do you need right now? These stories aren't just about ancient heroes, they're about you, your fears, your ambitions, your failures, and your hopes. And if there's one truth they all share, it's this: the journey of being human is messy but meaningful. As the philosopher Plutarch once wrote, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." Let these myths kindle something in you. Not just thoughts, but action, insight, and transformation. Because your story is still being written, and like every great myth, it's worth telling.